present. I will open this meeting of the Thompson Springs Special Service Fire District Administrative Control Board. The date is March 16th, 2021. The time 4:02. Commissioners that are present are Jacques Hadler, Sarah Stock, Tricia Dean, Gabriel Wojtek, Kevin Walker, and myself, Mary McGann. We have our Commissioner Administrator, Chris Baird, Associate Commissioner Administrator, Mallory Nassau. Christina Sloan still with us? Okay.
I am.
Okay, and Christina Sloan, County Attorney. I will call to order this meeting of the Thompson Springs Fire District. First business is citizens to be heard. Are there any citizens to be heard? Does not appear as though there's any citizens to be heard. One next order of business is approval of minutes. Do I have a motion?
Hey, Jenna.
Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Sorry, I move that we approve the minutes. How about that?
A motion by Kevin Walker, seconded by Evan Clapper. Discussion? All in favor, say aye. Raise your hand or both. Aye. Anyone opposed? Passes unanimously. Ratification of payment of bills. Do I have a motion?
I'll move that we ratify the payment of the bills as.
Excuse me?
I was moving to ratify the payment of bills as they are listed in the packet.
Motion by Kevin Walker. Do I have a second? Second by Jacques Hadler. Questions? Comments? All in favor? All opposed? Passes unanimously. We are to the fire chief's report. Chief Markham.
Thank you. So recent incidents in the area, I-70 has kind of been the hot spot. We've had 4 calls out there this month, all medical, except for Saturday we did have a system, some hail moved through town, and we had 2 separate simultaneous vehicle wrecks right outside of Thompson here. One vehicle ended up on its top. They thought they would need extrication, but some bystanders got there before me and were able to pull the people out. And then 2 other vehicles slid off the side and ran into each other. So luckily it was only minor injuries, but there was a huge response to that call as far as EMS, fire, and law enforcement. As far as apparatus or equipment goes, all our apparatus is functional right now. I did receive the backup generator about a week and a half ago. It's in the building, but it has not been installed yet. So I continue to follow up on that to get the electricians out here to get it going. Training tomorrow, I plan on a hands-on it, basically jaws of life training. Unfortunately, my jaws of life are about 20 years old, and they operate under about 10,500 PSI of pressure. So I do inspect the hoses, but definitely overdue for some new extrication equipment. Unfortunately, just one of those tools is about $10,000. So I'm working on funding and grants and stuff for that. We continue to have the Thompson Springs Fire Hazard and Rejuvenation weekly community action team meetings. Those have been pretty productive. Thank you, Trish and Mary McGann and the other people that are participating with that. We have some things planned. I did meet with the new BLM Fuels person yesterday and his assistant as far as the fuels break or the fire break goes on the west side of town. And now I'm being told that they need to do a NEPA study to kill some brush. So luckily they've done that project before several years ago, probably at least 5 years ago. So there is a NEPA study in place. Hopefully they can just revise that. We can get that fuels project done. I did attend the annual Southeast Utah Interagency Fire Spring Planning Meeting. It was a virtual meeting with probably about 50, 60 people. just some of the highlights of that was that the National Weather Service out of Junction in Salt Lake City, even though we've got a little moisture recently, predicts drought conditions to continue through at least June. And one of the things this means is with this prolonged drought, combined with possible monsoons this year. Last year we didn't get any monsoons, so we didn't have any lightning. But the worry that if we do get lightning with the monsoons this year, the fuel types of pinyon juniper and the heavier fuels will catch. So we're going to keep an eye on that. And one of the concerns I have is that the Interagency Operations Center, basically the federal firefighters that are based out of the Moab area, they moved their operations center down to Ken's Lake. So that means anything on the north end of town, the response is going to be even longer, probably at least an hour and a half for them to get out here unless they're in the area. So, I rely heavily on the Moab Valley Fire Department for all kinds of fires and extrication and stuff like that. But that's something I have to take in consideration for this future fire season. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Questions for Mark? Thank you, Mark. There is no new business. There's no old business, no future considerations or public hearing. We are at the end of our agenda, so I will adjourn this meeting unless someone opposes. Meeting adjourned. We are now entering Grand County Commission regular meeting. The date is Tuesday, March 16th, 2021. The time is 4:09. Present are Jacques Hadler, Sarah Stocks, Evan Clapper, Tricia Dean, Gabriel Wartek, Kevin Walker, and myself, Mary McGann, all commissioners. We have Commission Administrator Chris Baird, Associate Commission Administrator Mallory Nassau, Quinn Hall, Clerk Auditor, and Christina Sloan, County Attorney. First order of business is citizens to be heard. I want to say something before the citizens to be heard, somewhat as a citizen. When you're addressing the noise issues in this town, created by the large number of UTVs on our city and county roads, it is one of the most difficult and important issues facing both Grand County Commission and Moab City Council. I was saddened and frustrated when the Utah legislators were unwilling to give the people of Grand County 7 hours of reprieve from the drone of UTVs. I was frustrated because being lectured to for 15 minutes by a Utah senator because Grand County had not issued any tickets to UTV drivers for violating our noise ordinance. I attempted to explain to him how difficult it is to enforce a noise ordinance. Then during the March 2nd, 2021, I am part of a discussion on not only the difficulty of enforcing a noise ordinance, but also the cost. I was frustrated, and without thinking, I said, "Tell them they are not welcome." I apologize. That was an unthoughtful and unprofessional thing to say. Addressing the noise issue in Grand County is difficult, to say the least. I was frustrated. I welcome UTV drivers and their machines in a manner that does not, when they come to the town and do not create any more noise than a car when driving by homes and businesses. UTV drivers who respect our backcountry by staying on the trails, packing out trash, and being respectful of other type of recreationists are welcome. The same can be said to all visitors to Grand County. Respect the people who live here in our magnificent backcountry. I do not welcome UTV recreationists that tear up and down our streets all hours of the night and day, creating unhealthy levels of noise, who race around the backcountry, leaving the trail and leaving trash and human waste. Same can be said for all visitors to our county. If you don't respect the citizens of Grand County and our backcountry, you are not welcome. There are many polite and respectful UTV drivers, and it is a shame that some bad apples are spoiling it for residents, business, other recreationists as well, and for the respectful UTV drivers. Once again, I apologize for my unthoughtful and unprofessional statement I made during the March 2nd, 2021 Grand County Commission meeting. Thank you. I open it to the public for citizens to be heard. Do we have any citizens to be heard? Mallory?
We do have a few folks on. It looks like Liz has turned on her camera. So Liz, are you on for public comment? Okay,
I am. I was just sending you a note in the chat. Thanks, Mallory.
no problem.
So I'm up.
Yes. Yes.
I just wanted to, I listened to that whole workshop and I'm just amazed at all the information that the county attorney presented. And I just got to say big kudos for her for working through all these various ordinances and regulations and presenting it to the commission. It's a big deal. And like Mary just said, it's a big deal to our community. And I am really supportive of the drafts that the county attorney has put before you guys. And I also agree with actually regulating some of these businesses via the business license. I mean, business licenses in Grand County are a privilege. They're not a right. And I realize that business owners, you know, they contribute to the economy, but also they're impacting residents here. So I encourage you to use all the tools in the toolbox that you have to get a handle on the UTV noise in our community. And I think we should come out of the chute at, you know, come off of the starting line with some strong ordinances and that will hopefully make a difference. And I realize we can amend them down the road, but I do hope that we can come out with some strong ordinances that'll really help residents, you know, and improve their quality of life. That's all. But I just so can't say how much I appreciate all the county attorneys' work on this and the commissioners for working through this. It's complicated and difficult. So thank you guys.
Thank you, Liz. Next.
Next we have Reed.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, Reed.
Hi, my name is Reed Pendleton. It's been a few minutes since I've been on here, but just had a few comments today. One, I want to support talks of continuing with the bypass discussion. I know several of my neighbors down here in the south end of the valley were very frustrated with the amount of time that it takes just to get to work, to get to downtown, to run errands, to, you know, the constant amount of traffic that we deal with, you know, as residents. It would be, I think, very helpful to have a lot of that truck traffic and bypass traffic routed. And obviously it's going to be inconvenient to somebody, and I understand that. But this town is just going to continue to get busier. You know, they're going to develop the south end of the valley, and they're building a medical center right now. And it's just continuous growth on the south end is just going to add more and more traffic, and we need to have a second route through town. I listened to most of that, the first half of the discussion today on the workshop. Just a couple comments. In regards to the OAOs being responsible for reckless UTV owners, you know, I disagree with that wholeheartedly. You know, people come and they rent, you know, an overnight accommodation from us, you know, whether it be a hotel or a house or, you know, a campground in my sake. You know, they're polite here. If they're reckless here, we deal with that on site. But after they leave our premise, we have no idea how they're going to behave. And so being punished for something that they're doing where we have no idea what they're doing, it just doesn't seem like we should be held responsible for that. Like I said, I have several properties and I deal with them, you know, on site. You know, outside of that, I don't think it's a fair thing. I do feel like the aftermarket stuff that people have added, I mean, I've had side-by-sides I wouldn't even allow to drive in my campground because they were so obnoxious. But, you know, I own a stock side-by-side, and, you know, it's loud, but, you know, I don't want to modify that in order to use it. And so as a resident, I don't think stock jeans should be, I don't know. I think there needs to be a balance there. You know, I do agree with some of the aftermarket stuff is just, you know, obscenely loud. And then there was a comment about the resort special area on the north end of town. I am pursuing a resort facility up there in resort special, and that was part of my plan, was to have some kind of a UTV business up there. I have some partners in mind that I was working with, and I think the comments made, I can't remember who made the comments that Christina mentioned, but I think having a business north of town would be a great idea. One, their access to the trails is immediate. And then if they did have to come down to Keene Creek or Sand Flats, they would have to trailer that. Knowing that you're getting from rentals or tours from north end of town is not going to impact the locals, residences. And so I think encouraging or allowing, somebody to potentially do something north of
Their own
town.
citizens be heard. No.
Anyway, and then, just a frustration I have with noise ordinance, and I don't know if this was discussed at all, but the truck Jake brakes, my house this morning, I live 1,000 feet off the highway in the south end of the valley, and 5 o'clock this morning, truckers going down Jake braking. So I think there's several parts of noise that affect people in this town, not just UTVs. And so if we're going to start finding ways to enforce and regulate noise, I think we need to, look at all different aspects of noise and how that affects every business and every resident in the valley. That's
Thank
all.
you,
Thanks.
Reed. Thank you. Next.
See, Anthony, are you on for public comment?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So I wanted to bring up the idea of north of town at the river. If you drive past Matrimony Springs, you go a little bit further and then you drive up that first hill and there's a big culvert right under there before you drop off into the camp park. That's a perfect spot to start a trailhead that will follow the hill west till it gets to almost Matrimony Springs, and then it can pop up on the top. And I've been looking at Google Earth quite in-depthly, and there is definitely ways to get 3 new trails that will all connect to Hell's Revenge. And then that way we can funnel all the UTV people who want to drive, we can funnel them that way to a new entrance point, which will bring in more revenue because we haven't been allowed to make any new roads in a very long time, or new trails, I mean. And it advertises itself because it's right on the bridge, or right there. And I've been talking to a lot of people in the biking, the pedal bike community, the mountain bikers, and I'm trying to get them on board with shifting their trails to the east. And then that gives all the pedal bike people a whole new set of trails to ride on as well. Then that way we're keeping people who want to be quiet and in nature in one spot, and anybody who wants to be loud and obnoxious in the other spot. One other thing, everybody keeps saying that they don't understand what the people of Moab are talking about with the noise all over the place. Look at my YouTube. It's High Desert Woodworks. I've got nothing about woodworking on there, and it's basically a bunch of UTV running stoplights, racing, going from the stop sign and just hauling ass up sand flats at all hours of the night. Last night, there was literally a race. There was about, 8 to 10 vehicles, and there was 3 or 4 UTVs and 3 or 4 or 5 ATVs, 4-wheelers, quads. And they were, you can hear them all the way from sand flats all the way to the bowling alley. That's how far away this noise of the UTVs travel. There is one video about one single UTV and no other traffic driving up sand flats by they drove all the way up to where you turn at the whatever center it is up there. But it got louder as he gave it more throttle. And I only had my phone recording, and I was down, about where my mailbox is. So I say take them all off the roads, because this is getting out of hand. And like you said, like everybody says, it's only going to get busier. So we obviously need to do something. And if we have to blast in a new road and compromise with everybody, and they can compromise with us, if we can build the new road, then they can trailer their ATVs until we get the road built. But
Thank you.
that's some of my ideas.
Thank you, Anthony. Next.
Yep.
I'm just gonna call on a few folks here that I'm not sure if they're on for public comment. So if you are on, please turn on your camera or press *6 to unmute. But let's see, Jennifer, are you on for public comment?
Yeah, I think so. I'm really trying to observe and learn, because this process has been uncomfortable, to say the least, for the outfitters here in the county. Chris, I listened to the last meeting, and the point was made that there's 4 of us, and the biggest one of us has 13 cars. I also have 13 cars, Christina. I'll be sending you my inventory, but we're not racing up and down Sand Flats. We're not the lone car. The bigger problem that you're trying to solve, I get, I really, really do. But I get it. Our cars are on the streets. I do. But we have so few cars out here. We're not renters. It was already stated that we don't have rental fleets. We use our tours, our people follow us, and we go up twice a day and we come back twice a day. And I guess the only correlation that I can understand is if you can't regulate our cars through the same noise ordinance that you will everyone else, because the state law has a standard and you can't be stricter than that. So you're going to go after our business license with making our equipment not in compliance for a conditional business license. I can't think of another analogy, and perhaps I understood wrong, but isn't that kind of like giving a bar a license to sell liquor, but your liquor has to be, or your beer has to be 2% ABV instead of the state standard? I don't know. I'm trying to observe and not, I'm happy to make comment, but I'm in a learning phase right now. And I feel like we've been vilified. We're good stewards of this community. We're good stewards. We're good ambassadors for this community. We take people out, we show them a good time, and then they come back and they spend money at dinner and other entertainment venues. And they come back again and again with us because we are good stewards. So I guess I wish I felt better about my relationship with my county, because I feel like I've been made to be public enemy #1, and that's not who I am and not what my business is either. So I appreciate the opportunity to comment.
Thank you, Jennifer. Next.
Let's see, Brett, are you on for public comment? Looks like Brett B. Okay. Tyler, are you on for public comment?
Not at this time.
Okay. And then we have a phone number with the last 4 digits, 2859. If you're on for public comment, please press *6 to unmute. And next, it looks like a phone number with the last 4 digits, 6220. Okay, unless I'm missing anybody, I think we're good to go, Mary.
Thank you, Mallory. Thank you. We are to approval of minutes for March 21st, March 2nd, 2021, and March 10th, 2021 special meeting. Do I have a motion?
I move to approve both the minutes of March 2nd, 2021 and the special meeting on March 10th, 2021.
Thank you, Sarah. Do I have a second? Thank you, Kevin. Motion by Sarah, second by Kevin. Discussion? All in favor, say aye. Raise your hands or both. Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, we are to ratification of bills. Ratifying total bills of $539,084.97. Total payroll, $235,541. Total bills and payroll, $774,585.38. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a motion by Kevin? Do I have a second? Thank you, Jacques Hadler, seconded by Jacques. Discussion? I will call for a vote. All in favor of ratifying the bills, say aye. Raise your hand. Passes unanimously. Thank you. We are to commission disclosures. Does any commissioners have any disclosure for something that is on this agenda? Okay. We are to general commission reports and future considerations. Jacques Hadler.
Hey, thanks, Mary. It's been a busy couple weeks. On the 8th of March, I participated in an e-bike subcommittee meeting of the Motorized Trails Committee, discussing the increase of e-bikes on our trails here and future places where they might recreate. And then on the 9th, I participated in a trail mix meeting. One of the discussions of interest was hand cycle access on our local trails. On the 9th also, I did the Old Spanish Trail Arena meeting where we took a tour of a future dog park there. On the 11th, Motorized Trails Committee meeting where we discussed, we had a presentation by Christina, the attorney, where we discussed a lot of the OHV regs that we discussed today and had a lively discussion afterwards. On the 11th, I attended a Colorado River path completion discussion with a few other commissioners about completing the trail along the Colorado River. And on the 12th, Historical Preservation Committee, where officers were elected, and we discussed potential Dewey Bridge restoration. And then yesterday we did the Chamber of Commerce kind of town hall style meeting on UTV noise. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacques. Sarah?
Thanks, Mary. Let's see. The Mosquito Abatement District is hiring a supervisor. This job position will be posted till $85,000 starting salary to $65,000. We haven't had a meeting of the Moab Area Watershed Partnership, but we will be tomorrow. And at 2 o'clock, I wanted to let the public know that there'll be a special state of the groundwater discussion about Spanish Valley with a science panel and a question and answer period after. So the link to that should be up on the Moab Area Watershed Partnership website. And there'll also be a posted version of that presentation if you can't make the 2 o'clock. I've been having meetings with people about the 100 Communities Initiative, the renewable initiative, and we will hear from Christopher Thomas later about that program and have a discussion. And then I attended the Utah DNR's Forestry, Fire, and State Lands presentation about this process that they're initiating to develop a recreation resource management plan for the Colorado and Green Rivers. This will be a multi-year endeavor, and it will strive to alleviate some of the crowding and mixed use issues on our rivers. This process is where the public can give input about motorized and non-motorized travel on the Moab Daily, for instance, as well as other stretches and other issues. They will be studying Westwater Canyon, Meander Canyon, Labyrinth Canyon, the Green River Valley, and the Moab Daily. So basically all of our region's rivers. You can find more online at bit.ly/CGRRRMP. That's all I have for now.
Could you put that link in the chat?
Sure, yeah.
Evan Clapper?
Yeah, I met with the Sand Flat Stewardship Committee, and some exciting things there are some new, if you've been up there, you might have noticed that there's some new campground shade structures that have been built. Also exciting with that is there's a new picnic area with shade structure at the Fins and Things trailhead. So similar to the picnics at Slick Rock, but Slick Rock's big blacktop paved area, and the Fins and Things trailhead is a little more low key in my opinion. But I'm excited about that because that's you don't have to get a campsite to go up and like cook out and have dinner and go home. So that's exciting. There was also discussion around lower Raptor route pathway options, and one of the path or routes would connect different campgrounds and be built more as like a park style trail with possibly like a road grade or a road base, or possibly even paved or something like that, as another walking option, strollers, all that, as well as bikes, just kind of getting around sand flats without having to drive. So that was cool to kind of see more diverse trail style options being planned. There was a Sand Flats volunteer day with Fins and Things, as well as a BLM Outfitters work day on Hell's Revenge. And then we had a big annual report about 2020. So lots of info there. I'll jump over. I met with EMS Special Service District this morning. We also got a big final report from 2020. And just a reminder to new commissioners, this is a fairly young district. This was just came online 2 years ago, I believe. And so they just had their fraud risk assessment kind of self-reporting audit completed. And so identifying some areas there of just kind of like, really maturing this district into a great thing. They're really in a good spot. That the director's report from 2020 was really good and exciting. They've accomplished a lot of things, and I actually asked Andy if he'd be willing to come to this body and give us a brief kind of update, so that everyone's aware of the exciting things that are happening up on the Hill and within the department. So you can look forward to that in a few weeks. Besides that, I also met with the earmark group to see if these federal funds might become available and how we could get a project for Grand County included in that, and what the best project may be, and how to lobby for that. So I think that's all I got. I'll stop and keep this party rolling.
Thank you, Evan. Trish Padine?
Mary, I'm going to turn off my video just in case my audio, you know what I mean, just to solidify that my audio will work appropriately. So I met with the Groundwater and Sewer Special Service District. We looked at the Division of Water Quality's annual report. There were some basic project updates, which included the new sewer line that you can see coming down 191 and also in Highlands. They gave a update on the snow report. Obviously, we're getting a little snow now, so that's looking really good. There, at that time, there was 216 acre feet in Kins Lake. And then there was a discussion about the beginning of the irrigation season and the idea that we have to be pumping water. We'll just see how this continued snow, storm cycle continues. So I met with the Planning Commission, and you'll be seeing most of that in this evening's commission meeting, so I won't really go over that. However, they did ask some commission members to make subcommittees to begin researching small ideas, and I know at this time one of the things that OB is looking at is surveying the Spanish Valley citizens, so that's great. I met with the Grand Conservation District. They were looking at backing both youth garden project in our village, as far as just some of their small projects. I met with the local homeless coordinating committee, and as of that meeting, there was 28 identified homeless. They are gathering statistics on the various types of homelessness that exist, and also some of the components that go along with that, such as felony, mental health status, substance abuse, do they have children? So as always, Rihanna from the Multicultural Center is just killing it with some of those statistics and gathering that information. I've met with the Thompson Springs, as Mark calls it, the Fire Hazard and Rejuvenation meeting. We meet weekly, and just working on that project. We spoke with Monument Waste and solidified some containers, and we've chosen dates for our initial cleanup. And so the goal is hopefully to get some money and community buy-in as to that initial cleanup. And then I met with Jock with the Historical Preservation Commission, and I was really excited to see that they're looking at rejuvenating Dewey Bridge for pedestrian and bike traffic. And that's it for me, Mary.
Thank you, Trish. Gabriel?
Thanks, Mary. I attended a workshop in Green River. It was my first in-person meeting in at least a year. It was at River Museum over there, so it was able to be sort of masked and socially distanced. But anyway, it was an AOG meeting to discuss a regional approach to economic development, so that there were commissioners and mayors and economic development directors from our 4-county area. There was a lot of stimulating discussion, just mostly talking about enhancing local assets in a way that will kind of coalesce into a regional approach that will benefit everyone. An example of this could that Mayor Niehaus brings up in these meetings is facilitating the development of OHV recreational areas, say in places that want them in Emory or Carbon, as a sort of safety valve to the congestion of that type of recreation in Grant, for example. Just in general, sort of getting away from a feast or famine approach and consolidating our voices to advocate effectively for rural Utah. So, it's a lot of good intention still at this point. I'm going to be meeting with the Economic Development Advisory Council this week to talk about putting some skin in the game, which is the general request, which isn't specific right now, would be to allocate some portion of SB 95 funds to this effort of regionality. I'm kind of excited about it. Certainly I want to be able to calibrate and sort of get an idea of what the direct benefits Grand would be getting out of a relationship, especially if we're going to be allocating some funds to that effort. But to me, it's a really good chance to sort of maintain some not only have Grand exercise some leadership muscle in our 4-county region, but just in general keep up some positive dialogue with some of these neighboring counties, which in my time on the commission, it seems too rare that occurs. I think with the exception of Commissioner Walker in particular, his reaching out to San Juan County, that's been an exception to that, of course. But I think in general, it seems like we're, in my experience, we've mostly been sort of trying to push back against other counties. And I think this is a great opportunity to sort of, stand shoulder to shoulder. I met with Trish real briefly to talk about some of the funding that I had sort of engaged AOG on for the Thompson Springs effort. And that was mostly just getting me up to speed with how that effort's going. So that was nice. Let's see. I had a meeting with the Canyonlands Healthcare Special Service District. The Department of Health has allowed visits of families in residence rooms. So it's a very positive and very emotional time for everyone at the care center, all the families and residents involved. It's just great. It's great that they're able to do that. The district voted in favor of selling a parcel of district property to the hospital for their expansion project during our last meeting. And I think that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabriel. Kevin Walker.
So let's see, going chronologically for things that made it onto my calendar. Participated in a listening session with the Department of Interior about the monuments. It was also interesting to hear what the Kane and Garfield County Commissioners had to say there. Had a pretty long call with Mike Duncan from Moab City and Mac McDonald from San Juan County. He's the county administrator down there, just talking through some of the details of the, to try to formalize our collaboration on planning issues in Spanish Valley. Worked on noise issues at various times, including a guest appearance at the Planning Commission meeting. I was at a road special service district meeting, and actually I'm a little bit surprised that the main thing that happened there was interviewing a board member for being reappointed, and but apparently it didn't make it onto our agenda, so I should check with them on that. Had some talks with the Dark Night Skies group about they recommend, as you know, we gave businesses and residences 5 years to comply with our new lighting rules, and that clock started ticking a couple of years ago. And so I don't think we want to wait until just 2 months before the deadline to suddenly think about that. So I was sort of soliciting input from them about how we could sort of have a smooth, easy transition. So that will hopefully be coming up in future meetings. Thanks.
Thank you, Kevin. Wow, everybody's been really busy. On the 4th, I met with the Mill Creek collaboration, and they discussed the recommendations on how to handle Mill Creek from having areas that are highly that are used very rarely to medium to use quite a bit, and that's the Powerhouse Lane. A lot of discussion on using the Potato Salad Hill as the main way for people to access power, the power dam, and so that we're not having the problems between visitors and the residents in that area. We also sent a letter of support to the UDOT supporting a shuttle that would make a stop at Powderhouse Lane so that people could shuttle to Powerhouse Lane and then walk to the creek and to the swim holes. So that was a good meeting. We met with the Housing Authority. The Walnut Lane is moving forward. They're working on setting up strategies to set priorities for land use. They've discussed updating Moab area affordable housing plan. And there's a new vista will start on the 19th. And they were excited that the state allocated $5 million for homeless and housing services. On the 5th, I met with as well as Gabriel, we met with Ryan Levitt and Jim Barker. They're two lawyers from Washington, D.C. They contacted us to discuss that the possibility of getting some federal funds. The federal government is reintroducing a program similar to the earmarks, but it's a lot, they put a lot of restrictions on it and have tightened up the process to avoid what happened in the past where there was a misuse of the funding. For instance, they
Mary, you muted yourself.
Mary, you muted, yeah.
They I didn't even know that. They're limiting the number that of projects each senator and representative can ask for. They have rigorous vetting. Community support is very much needed, and they have existing standards. And they're not for, you cannot ask for anything for a for-profit organization. So that was really exciting. We found out that they were kind of hoping we would hire them to help us get some earmarks, and we realized that that was out of our budget at that time. But then on Monday, I got a call back and they said they would do pro bono for everything except the lobbying, which was a huge gift to this county. I mean, a huge gift. I will be organizing a thank you note, thank you letter for us to send to them. So we organized a team, and on the team is Chris Baird, myself, Joette Langanese, Evan Clapper, Gabriel Wojtek, Elaine Gisler, Karen Guzman Newton, Lori, what's her last name, from the lawyer from Moab City's lawyer, and Jacques Hadler. We met with them. They gave us what we need to do. We're on a real strict timeline. We have to have everything ready by the 1st of April. So this is a big lift, but we have a great team and people are very excited to finish the gap on the Moab pathway, which is very exciting. The next hopeful thing that we are hoping for is that right now the Republican Party is considering not participating in this program. And if that happens, then all of
Mary, you just muted yourself again.
how's that happening? I don't know. Anyway, we're hoping that Republicans choose to participate so that we can move forward and hopefully finish the gap in the Colorado River Parkway. I met with Sean Reddish of Rally on the Rocks. He wanted to talk. It was a very polite and good sharing conversation where we shared a lot. I think he understood much more where the frustration is coming from, and I gained an understanding that this member of the Rally on the Rocks really wants to work with us, is willing to share in the cost of doing noise ordinances and helping in any way to create strategies to decrease the noise of the UTVs. I met with the Travel Council, and Jennifer Jones of the BLM gave a great presentation. I'd almost like her to come here and do it for us sometime, but our meetings are long enough. She reported that graffiti and vandalisms are really on the rise, significantly on the rise, and it's very concerning. And we're not sure if it's from COVID and frustration people are feeling. At this point, we have 44 fee campgrounds and 29 are reservable. There are 709 individual campsites. In 2010, there was 1.6 million visitors on BLM land, In 2019, even with the pandemic, there were 3 million. That is just scary that it has increased to that point. The TRT from commercial and private campgrounds, in 2020, it was $377,000 and $377,274. It's slightly down from 2019, which was $446,000 and $446,088. So I thought that was impressive that it was down that little, considering the length of time that they were all closed. The travel council is working on their bylaws. We met with, Evan and I met with Jeff Rasmussen, the head of the state parks, to discuss what we wanted to see and our hopes for the Utah Raptor State Park. Evan was invaluable. He had so many amazing ideas and really helped the conversation move on. It's exciting. They're hoping to have the park up and ready for visitors in 2022, which is a very short timeline. But they very much recognize that because it's now on people's radar, they're even more concerned about the area being more devastated. And then on the 11th and 12th, we continued our work on the Colorado Pathway. Thank you. Does anybody have future considerations? Okay, let me find my agenda. We are now to elected official reports. Quinn Hall, do you have anything?
Not really. I set the date for the tax sale. We'll be doing that May 27th. We're going to send out some letters. In talking with Chris Kaufman, I don't think we'll actually make it to the tax sale. Most of the properties are very close to complete redemption. So I think that'll be off the table hopefully soon. Other than that, we're working towards the audit at the end of April and working with Christina on the business licensing stuff. So that's all I've got.
Thank you. Thank you. Christina?
You guys will hear plenty from me tonight and already have, so I'll leave it at that for now.
Mary, you did it again.
I don't know why that's happening.
So Mary, it might be that your mouse cursor is over the mute button. So anytime you touch the trackpad, it clicks it. So if you move the cursor.
Okay. Okay. I didn't even think I touched the pad. It was acting up last time too. So Chris Baird and Mallory.
Thank you, Mary. So just following up a little bit on the Utah Raptor State Park, I also got word that they're going to postpone building the campground at Dalton Wells so that they can incorporate that design into the larger park design. So that project's kind of been mothballed in favor of doing the larger park project. But yeah, they're hoping to get it up and running by spring 2022. So that's a short timeline, but more power to them if they can pull it off. That's great. And then also looking like we're going to be able to get another coronavirus relief grant for our airport to the tune of about $1 million. And so I think that'll be another big help and kind of prompt a pretty significant budget amendment. One of the things I think we need to kind of keep in mind when we're going through budget amendments related to short-term funding like this is that these grants are going to essentially eliminate our costs for operating the airport and its debt service. But we don't want to get ourselves obviously in a position where we take the money that we're saving that used to come from the general fund and then, you set it aside for other annual obligations, because then when the grants go away, we'll be in big trouble. But I do think that setting that money aside for future matches on airport project grants, and maybe some other one-time costs would be a good idea. But that's another bit of good news financially. Also, the American Rescue Plan Act appears to have granted Grand County about 1.8 million. And I'm not entirely sure of the details on how we're going to get that money. It kind of appears that it's going to be directly provided to Grand County as opposed to going through the state legislature this time. I haven't confirmed all this yet. And it also appears that it may be possible to use it for revenue replacement. And just as a quick segue there, I just wanted to give an update on our 2020 finances, because we have to accrue the first couple months of revenue into the prior year. And so I'm going to share my screen real quick. This is just a graph of 2020. These are all of our sales, use, and excise taxes all together, summed up, and then it's by month. You can see that in the spring months here, from March through June, that coronavirus took a really heavy toll on our revenue. And then starting about July, we actually bounced back to really record levels. The third and fourth quarter of 2020 are probably our busiest third and fourth quarter in history. And you can see, especially looking at September, October, and November, that this orange or red bar graph line here represents 2020, and then the blue is 2019. So well in excess, way over 2019 levels. However, all sum told, it wasn't enough to recover our loss from the spring. So we're still about $1.4 million less in revenue for sales, excise, and use taxes for 2020. And so that could bode well potentially for being able to use this new American Rescue Plan Act money, if it's possible to use it for revenue replacement. And then just scrolling down, this is the totals by tax, 2019 versus 2020. You can see that our sales taxes actually came out about the same as 2019. The main loss was in TRT and restaurant, but everything else recovered really surprisingly well. So most of that loss, that 1.4 million, was in TRT. So just a little update on some of the finances for 2020, and especially since it kind of relates to that $1.8 million American Rescue Plan Act money that appears to be giving us 1.8 million. More details on that later. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mallory, if I can figure out how to stop sharing my screen here.
I don't think I have anything to report today. Thank you.
Okay.
Chris, I had a quick question on revenue. That $1.4 million shortfall, is that over all sources, including TRT?
All sales, use, and excise taxes, including TRT.
Okay, thanks.
So that's not all of our revenue, obviously. There's other revenue streams, especially out of the airport and Old Spanish Trail Arena, that we're going to see some pretty heavy revenue losses also in 2020, but I haven't calculated those yet. But we're getting close to being able to close out 2020 year and provide some more reports on how things shook out. It was, like I said, a strong third and fourth quarter, but not strong enough to actually bring us back up to the level that we were at 2019. So there was a significant revenue loss in 2020. Anybody have any other questions before I pass the torch?
Thank you, Chris.
Mary?
Thank you. We don't have department reports, and we do not have any presentations. So we are moving to presentation on recreational, excuse me. We do have presentation on recreational opportunity spectrum classes regarding the Manti-LaSalle National Forest draft plan and zoning management for non-motorized and motorized recreation. Brian Murdoch.
Thanks, Mary. Good to see you all. It's been a while. Good to see you virtually at least. Yeah, so I'm Brian Murdoch. I'm the Recreation Wilderness Manager here on the local Ranger District, Moab Monticello Ranger District. And we're going to be doing a short presentation for you here today on Recreation Opportunity Spectrum, which is tied into our forest plan revision, which the county is a cooperating agency and has been working with us on. Before we jump into that, I want to introduce a couple other Forest Service folks that are here with us that you may or may not know. Michael Engelhart is our fairly new district ranger. I'm not sure if he's been to the meetings or not yet, but he is coming to us from the Dakotas and is here in Moab now and is our district ranger, and he'll be doing the actual presentation tonight. And the other Forest Service person with us is Autumn Ela, who has worked here before in the recreation program and has come back now. We talked her into coming back, and she is our assistant planner. And she'll be running the PowerPoint for us for tonight. So Michael, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Mary. Thanks, Commission, for allowing us to come here and give a presentation on Recreation Opportunity Spectrum. As Brian said, I'm the district ranger for the Moab and Monticello Ranger District. I'm still fairly new to the area, but I think I've at least virtually met you all before. Autumn will take a moment to get the presentation up for us and share her screen there. But what I'm going to be talking about tonight is just what ROS is, what is Recreation Opportunity Spectrum is, some of the classifications of it, the utility of it as a management tool and to our public, and some proposed changes under our forest plan revision. And then after that, Autumn will be able to put up some GIS for you all to kind of see some of the proposed changes out there in regards to this recreation opportunity spectrum. Autumn? Thank you. So this presentation was put together for Recreation Opportunity Spectrum by the Manti-LaSalle Forest Plan Revision team. The biggest thing here is, what is ROS? All right, so we all ought to know what it is. ROS is a zoning tool developed in the 1970s to classify and monitor existing and desired recreational settings. And it's a primary tool for us for providing recreation input to forest planning. Thinking about it as a zoning tool, it's important to remember that this is not a specific decisional tool over a single road or removing roads or adding roads. It is a planning tool. The premise of it is that it provides certain habitats across the landscape for a variety of recreational types. We've put a couple of photos up here just to kind of conceptualize that. It's activity plus setting equals opportunity. Now, in the minds of Americans, culturally, the cultural concept of camping varies widely. So if we take the concept of camping and we add that to an undeveloped site, the opportunity it provides is for solitude, maybe some challenge, and a bit of self-reliance. You take camping again and put it with the developed site, and we get comfort, safety, and more of a social nature to it. And the categories of our zoning, so to speak, help us kind of classify those and plan for the future to provide those opportunities. The spectrum that we look at really have 6 classifications, everything from primitive to urban. On the primitive end, you'll get the level of access is of course going to be minimal, very low. Something in the middle like roaded natural will be quite easy for folks to access, and in regular vehicles, no special equipment required there. And then of course the urban access is where it's really built for access and development and for social encounters. as far as remoteness is concerned on the primitive end, of course, we get high remoteness. We don't, there's not a whole lot of opportunity to run into other folks out there. It's more of a natural setting in that. And then of course, level of remoteness on the urban end of the spectrum is minimal. On to the next slide. All right, so here on the Manti-La-Sal, we have 4 of these 6 settings that are identified. Those 4 are the rodent natural, the semi-primitive motorized, semi-primitive non-motorized, and primitive. Rodent natural are lands with modifications, including trails and roads, structures and developments are very common, and social encounters are frequent. Semi-primitive motorized are lands with some modifications, primarily both motorized and non-motorized trails, as well as roads. Structures and developments become rarer. Social encounters are moderate. Semi-primitive non-motorized are lands with few modifications, including some evidence of trails and roads, but are usually closed to motorized use. Structures and developments are rare, and social encounters are few. And primitive is the most extreme side on the left of the spectrum. Lands that are essentially unmodified with some evidence of trails but no motorized use. Structures and development are absent, and social encounters are few to none. And we have many areas like that here on the forest. The next slide is going to really show you just visually the concepts of these 4 classifications. Primitive, of course, in the upper left is something that you got to hike to. You got to work to get to that. Your own 2 legs are often carrying you to those places. You're not going to see a whole lot of evidence of people out there. There's going to be some evidence of trails, of course, but these are really more remote areas or areas that just haven't had any development within them. Semi-primitive in the upper right, showing a developed trail. Horses are able to follow that trail, just something more of a trailed system, trailed area. Semi-primitive motorized, there you see in the lower left is something we encounter often on our forests. There's, of course, maybe a native two-track road out there, the vegetation growing in, still not very well developed, but certainly accessible to a number of vehicles, and of course you're going to run into some additional infrastructure in those areas. And roaded natural, this is the area where you're going to find, these are the areas where our campgrounds are off of, where you certainly would find more developed administrative sites of ours, picnic tables and fire rings and those sorts of things. Right, so ROS classes, they're linked with suitability for activities, developmental levels, and sorry, I lost my place here, sorry about that, and motorized, non-motorized use. Desired conditions in the plan outline this link between the suitability for activities and the developmental levels, as well as the motorized and non-motorized use. And in the plan, there's also going to be standards and guidelines that provide further direction on what is or what is not suitable in specific classes. A couple of notes with the 2012 planning rule, there is a definition of suitability of lands there. Specific lands within a plan area will be identified as suitable for various multiple use or activities based on the desired conditions applicable to those lands. The plan will also identify lands within the plan area as not suitable for uses that are not compatible with desired conditions for those lands. And the 2015 Planning Handbook plans should include suitability determinations for motorized recreation, including over the snow vehicles consistent with the desired recreation opportunity spectrum class. This suitability of areas may change by season. Travel management decisions are separate. Project level decisions that determine the specific areas and routes for motorized recreation consistent with areas identified in the plan are suitable for motorized recreation use. So why ROS? What is this utility? What purpose does this serve? And from the visitor's perspective, ROS links people with the landscape. there's a lot of intuition here with our forest visitors and how they experience the landscape. Where can I go to for the experience that I desire? In this zoning, people get a sense of where they can go if they want more solitude or if they want more of a social setting, high encounters, where they can bring their Jeeps or where they're going to bring their horses. So what transportation can I use in going and accessing these places? Is this something where I park a car at a trailhead or on the side of the road and hike into? Or is this a place where I can bring my whole family along? It's easily accessible. Grandparents, grandkids, folks of all ages have an ability to access that. So what level of development within will the area have? So can I expect to have a fire ring provided and a picnic table provided, or do I need to bring my own camp stove and other things like that? So what will the area look like? So what is the sense of these areas? Do they, are there cars passing all the time, or very rarely do you even hear them? What does the vegetation look like, and what's the experience around that vegetation? What are the roads? What kind of conditions the roads and trails are in? What kind of activities I can engage in? And how many other people are likely to be there when I do that? And so from the managerial perspective, there are certain ways that ROS helps us as well. ROS informs our decisions and it helps us plan for the future. So what recreation opportunities do we currently provide? And where do we want to prioritize certain opportunities? And are we meeting that public demand that's so important to do? And are our recreation opportunities compatible with other resource management objectives in the same areas? And what recreation opportunities do we want to provide into the future? And I'm going to turn this over to Brian for the next couple of slides to talk about the mapping protocol steps.
Thanks. So just so you guys, a little bit of background on the ROS too, this is, like I said, it's part of the much bigger forest plan revision. And one of the reasons we wanted to reach out is because I know there's been questions in both the motorized and non-motorized trail mix groups about this, because as we'll see in a couple of slides here, it looks like and it is a pretty significant change from our existing forest plan, and we'll kind of explain why that is as well. So when we sat down to do ROS, which we're required to do for a new forest plan, they don't just hand me a marker and say, okay, draw what you want on the forest. Most of this is a GIS exercise and modeling exercise based on existing infrastructure. So without getting too far into the weeds, this is kind of the flow chart that we use to come up with the ROS classifications with the zoning. So it's based primarily around our travel routes, our existing road system, our open road system on the forest. We take that, we buffer those roads, we apply a bunch of different criteria like remoteness, how far away it is from roads. We move on through and talk about physical settings, evidence of human criteria like campgrounds or communication towers, or other things that might be out on the landscape in the forest. And when we get all the way through this, we come up with mapped zoning for the different classifications. So that's our existing ROS class. In the plan, we will have what is called the desired ROS, or how we'd like to manage those pieces of the Forest Service into the future. And those may change based on alternatives as well. But what we have right now in the draft plan shows those desired ROS classes that we would like to use to zone with. So that's the basic protocol. And that's one of the things we keep trying to get out there, is just that this isn't something we just came up with. It's a GIS modeling. As it would be applied right now, no roads would be closed with this. That's one of the things of misinformation that's come up, is it would be closing a bunch of roads. Basically, this is modeling around the existing infrastructure. I can go to the next slide, Autumn. This just shows a real quick breakdown of the buffers. They go everywhere from 150 feet to a quarter mile from a road, and that is depending on the topography. So where there's a 40% slope, that's generally where we put the buffer off of the road, unless it's more than a quarter mile away, and then we have a quarter mile buffer. So as you see, when we get to the roads, we'll get things like Geyser Pass will have pretty wide corridors going up through there as a roaded natural, as our more developed kind of road system through the forest. And areas where you're right up against a cliff face, there's no reason to put, you know, a roaded natural zone clear up on top of the cliff that you're not able to reach. So we base those off of that topography. So it's not just a standard buffer from those road systems.
Thanks, Brian. So in looking at our summer south zone ROS versus our draft ROS, we've put together this chart here to kind of demonstrate some of the proposed forest plan acres versus the 1986 plan acres. So you'll see that there was relatively no change within the primitive classification. In the roaded natural, we see a loss of 94,000 or 95,000 acres there. In semi-primitive motorized, we see a decrease in about 82,000 acres there. And in semi-primitive non-motorized category, we see quite an increase of 176,000, maybe 177,000 acres for that category of semi-primitive non-motorized. And I'll go on to explain a little bit how modeling this around inventory roadless areas kind of explains a little bit of that. On to the next slide, please, Autumn. All right. So these are pie charts just demonstrating the differences between our current ROS distribution versus our draft ROS distribution. You'll see in the current ROS distribution, almost 55% of that is in the semi-primitive non-motorized category. So by far, it was the largest category in our current plan. In our draft plan, you can see on the right-hand side, a bit of a balance happening there where we see that semi-primitive motorized balancing out to 39.4% and 38.7% for the semi-primitive non-motorized. And primitive, slight gain there, as I said before, and roaded natural, there's a decrease there. So you'll see that balance in particular in the draft between semi-primitive non-motorized versus the semi-primitive motorized. And this is an important slide to just show how this is modeled around current management and current conditions out there, current infrastructure out there. What this slide really shows is that semi-primitive non-motorized area, while it seems to have grown so much in looking at the last two slides, what you'll see is that semi-primitive non-motorized area lines up already with inventory roadless areas to a high degree. So 25.2% is already designated inventory roadless areas, and that makes up a big chunk of the semi-primitive non-motorized area already. So only 13.5% of the total land distribution is actually that is proposed to be classified as semi-primitive non-motorized is not in an IRA already. And we wanted to show you some GIS. I'm going to ask Autumn to bring that up and demonstrate to you what that looks like on the land now that we've gone through the charts and graphs. Now we can go ahead and take a look at the GIS exercise.
I had something real quick, Michael, too.
Yes.
And you guys probably already know this, but in the forest plan, first of all, one of the most controversial things we deal with is roads. I mean, that's just across public lands and everybody, roads and trails. So that's where some of this has come up too, as people have had a lot of questions about that, because we're not doing travel planning in a forest plan. That is something that will come after. However, if people are interested in roads and trails, we are doing zoning that will say this type of roads and trail can be here, this type can be here. So that's why I've worked with Trail Mix a lot to get that point across, is if you are interested in roads and trails, this ROS zoning is incredibly important. So it's really the meat of the forest plan when it comes to roads and trails. But like I said, it doesn't close any roads based around our existing infrastructure, and just kind of sets up future use, places where we're going to say we're not going to build new motorized roads and trails, and areas where we say, yeah, we will look at that in these other zones. So just wanted to throw that in there.
Yeah, excellent addition, Brian. Thank you for that. And Autumn, turning it over to you to discuss the GIS.
Thanks, Michael. So I just brought up the map of the Moab district, and right now what you're seeing on your screen is our current management plan ROS classifications. So primitive is in blue, semi-primitive non-motorized is in light green, semi-primitive motorized is in orange, and roaded natural is in red. So you can see on the Moab district, our current management has a considerable amount of semi-primitive motorized, as Michael showed in our previous slides as well. And I'm going to scroll down to show you what our draft plan ROS classifications would be, and you will see that change, that kind of balancing out, if you will, of the motorized versus the non-motorized classes. So as I go down, you can see the light green again, the semi-primitive non-motorized becomes far more common across the landscape than it is under our current plan. I'll go back up and you can again see that change between our current and our draft. And the hashed areas kind of here in the middle, etc., on the Moab face, and then over in Rock Creek are our inventoried roadless areas, which is Michael explained. They didn't exist when we had our 1986 management plan, so we did not consider them when we were classifying for the recreation opportunity spectrum. But now that they do exist, we have kind of changed our recreation opportunity spectrum in the draft plan to better align our recreation opportunities with our inventoried roadless areas. And I'll just show that once again. You'll see that most of those areas become that green color. So I think that's all I have, Michael, unless there's any questions specifically that or places you'd like me to zoom into on the GIS.
Yeah, I would put that to commission if they would like to look at specific areas.
Commissioners, do you have any questions or areas you would like to look at closer?
Questions about the map or just questions in general?
Both.
I got a little bit confused. You mentioned one ROS mapping exercise you did, which really was a GIS exercise, just buffering the existing travel plan. But then later on, you were mentioning desired future condition. And these maps you're showing us, is this a mechanical exercise on the existing road network, or is it just some draft statement about where you want things to head?
This is primarily based on the GIS exercise. And we haven't changed it too much except for those buffers that I showed kind of based on topography. And so where the desired will come in, I mean, right now, this is what we're proposing in the plan. And if there's issues that come up, you know, say the county says, well, we'd like to see a motorized trail over here, that's where we can change that. If it happens to be in a semi-primitive non-motorized area, we could look at changing that in an alternative to allow for that road or trail. So, you know, it takes really knowing the district to be able to make comments about this, but that's what we're looking for from our cooperators and the public is, are there areas you're seeing here that you would like to see something that would be not allowed in the future where we could change those zones for a different desired ROS class?
And I assume that also for both additions to and subtractions from the road network, we would turn that into an ROS comment.
Yep. And one thing that this is not showing it without getting too much into the weeds is we have another process that is going to deal with recommended wilderness that the plan will also do. That'll be part of the decision from the plan. And those, if there are recommended wilderness units, those would actually show up as primitive ROS classes. So you may end up seeing, for instance, if we end up with a recommended wilderness in the Mount Peel area, that may actually go to a primitive ROS class. So that's not showing this here because right now we haven't made that decision, and that will come out through the public process and through planning. But that's another layer that may add to this and may add to more non-motorized classes.
Okay, well, that's maybe a good segue to my next question. On your tables, it showed that the primitive was not changing much, but on this map, I don't see any blue. So,
and that's exactly why. So the primitive doesn't change. If you go down, there's a little piece of it in Mount Peel right now. And as we have it in the plan, it doesn't change. But if that whole area was recommended wilderness, those could change significantly.
I see. I have a few more questions, but I'll pause and let other commissioners ask.
Any other commissioners have any questions? Go ahead, Kevin.
Well, this is maybe as much a comment as a question, but I mean, I think something we're grappling with as a county is just the density of the network, road network. And because we have mostly BLM land, we usually discuss that in BLM land, but it's an issue on the forest as well. And I do think, you know, this is my opinion at least, that as the number of visitors increase, the impacts of those roads increases as well. You know, so a travel plan that would have been pretty harmless in the 1990s because of low use, you know, it has a very different effect 20 years later when use has grown quite a bit. And so I guess one thing I'm very interested in is, you know, I think we do need to revise our attitudes about what a proper road density is. According to some figures I've seen, only about 7% of the LaSalle Ranger District is more than a mile from a road. I don't know if you've done that buffering exercise yourself. That seems very low to me. I mean, UTVs can be quite audible a mile away, you know, with low background noise. And so I'm hoping that the Forest Service is going to be, you know, open to considering ways of improving the balance for both quiet and motorized recreation.
That's a really good point. And if you look at the two classes that make up the motorized and the two classes that make up the non-motorized, we're much more in a 50-50 ratio now than we were like 80-20 before. And you know, I agree with you. I mean, it's hard with the noise. Some of these places, it's very hard to get away from a road. Even in our biggest roadless areas in the LaSalle's, you're going to hear a vehicle driving up Geyser Pass. And when we made this plan, the original plan in 1986, there was very few people driving over Geyser Pass. We're now getting 30, 40,000 people a year. It's the heaviest used road on the district, and we're having to make some changes for that. So part of this is, well, that's what this is about, is looking into the future and saying, hey, what are there quiet places we want to keep quiet? Are there places that are more suitable for motorized recreation? So that's definitely something that to keep in mind with comments, is that's, you know, this is going to be in place for decades. And we're really looking at how we want to manage this forest from a recreation perspective.
Okay, and then my last question, I promise, but what can you tell us about the schedule for you know, official scoping periods and, you know, various deadlines for comment and then over the next few months?
That will be an Autumn question for sure.
Yeah, she's super practiced at that one at this point. So Autumn, please.
So we actually are currently in a pre-scoping comment phase. And if you go to our website, which I can bring up the link to it right in just a, sorry, 1 second. Here at the top, you can make an official comment on our website right now, even though we are not in official scoping. We are hoping to enter official scoping here in the next couple months. We're in a little bit of a holding pattern due to the administration change, but that's why we're opening up this pre-scoping period, and all comments that are made now and during official scoping will be equally valued and will be taken into consideration and would give you standing in the future as well. So we encourage you to visit our website. There's far more information there than what we've presented today on all resources, not just recreation. And like I said, you can make your comment there as well. So, so I don't have a clear date for you, Kevin, but hopefully it will be here in the next couple months.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions?
One other thing I'd like to add real quick, Mary. This is summer ROS, and we're also looking at a winter ROS, but it will not be in the draft plan as is. But if that's something the county is interested in, I would recommend including that in comments as well, because we're going to be looking at zoning the winter ROS up there. So where over the snow vehicles would be allowed and where we will have quiet recreation. That is something else we'll be looking at, but we're not as far along with that with the mapping, so we didn't want to show that tonight. But I just want to bring that up because that is something people are interested in, and we'll be potentially including in the plan as we move through this.
Yes, thank you. That's good information. Any further questions? Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Brian, thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Just really quickly, if anybody does want to reach Michael, Brian, or myself to ask us further questions, you can access any of the three of us at our emails as well. And then just again, a reiteration of where you can make a comment as well. So with that, I will stop sharing.
Thank you. We are now moving to our second presentation and discussion on Community Renewable Energy Program. Christopher Thomas, Department of Sustainability, Senior Energy and Climate Program Manager. Christopher?
Thank you very much, Chair. Hopefully, I just shared my screen. Would somebody just give me a thumbs up if you can see that okay? Awesome. Thank you so much. Yes, thank you very much to Chris Baird. Thank you, Commission Chair and Commission members. My name is Christopher Thomas. I'm the Senior Energy and Climate Program Manager for Salt Lake City. I work in the Sustainability Department, and it's my pleasure to talk to you today about the Community Renewable Energy Program, or we also have been abbreviating it as CREP. So if I say CREP, it's the Community Renewable Energy Program. And now let's see if I can navigate to my next slide. There we go. Okay, so I wanted to give you just a little background as a starting point. The Community Renewable Energy Act was passed in 2019. It was also known as House Bill 411. It basically enabled a pathway for Utah communities who are in the Rocky Mountain Power Service Territory to achieve a 100% by 2030 renewable energy goal. And in order to be eligible to participate, a Utah local government would need to pass a resolution by the end of 2019 setting forth this goal of 100% renewable energy by 2030. That program was later codified, or that law was later codified into the Utah state rules through the Public Service Commission. And it really, as far as we know, would be a first of its kind in the nation, where basically within a monopoly investor-owned utility setting, like we are in Utah, if Rocky Mountain Power is your service provider, we would be able to leverage community choice to help determine and clean up our electricity mix. So we're very excited about it for that reason. In Grand County, eligible communities include both Castle Valley and Moab. And Grand County also passed a resolution, so the county is eligible to participate. Then so that was back in 2019. Let's turn to some recent developments. So with the help of several attorneys, we have negotiated over the course of the last year an interlocal agreement, or ILA, which would serve as what is called in the program rules, the governance agreement. Basically, the law and the rules require that this collection of communities have a governance agreement that states, how do we as a collective make decisions? And so that's as basic as, how does the collection of local governments decide which new solar farm to procure or which new wind resource to procure? So it sets out that voting and decision-making capability. We recently held, oh, yeah, right. So that interlocal agreement, or ILA, is now available. In order to be able to vote and help influence the way that this community renewable energy program is designed, Grand County or any other eligible local government would need to sign on by July 31st of this year. Or there is actually kind of a late adopter option. So if you don't care as much about being able to vote and design the program, but you want to still be able to join, there is a last chance joining opportunity by January of 2022. So recently, the Utah 100 Communities Group, which is the name we've given to the collection of eligible communities, the governance subgroup of that Utah 100 Communities hosted 2 meetings and basically presented information about the proposed ILA, background, anticipated budget impacts, etc. So you can actually, if you want to, you can view all of those materials at that website, utah100communities.org. So feel free to look there for more information. Excuse me, in terms of the other local governments I mentioned, Moab and Castle Valley, Moab, I know, held a council meeting on this topic on February 23rd. I believe it was, I can't speak for them, but I believe it was the notion was favorably received, and they're planning to move forward. And I know that Castle Valley has been giving regular updates at their council meetings. So I think there's good, strong local support for this concept and moving to the next steps. So in terms of framing up the opportunity to proceed, basically the question is, does Grand County become an official participating community in the Community Renewable Energy Program by signing on to the interlocal agreement, also known as the governance agreement? There's also another kind of add-on to that, which is if Grand County does want to participate, then there's the optional question of, does the county want to participate as a quote unquote anchor community? And I can go into the anchor community concept a little bit more later, but basically the anchor, there's a smaller collection of the 23 eligible communities who will sign on as anchors, and they basically backstop the entire effort so that it keeps the cost to participate for everybody else the same. So like I said, I'll go into that a little bit more later, but just keep that concept in your head of anchor community. And then if Grand County does participate, it would then also name a primary and alternate board member who would represent Grand County agency formed by the interlocal agreement. So let me talk a little bit about the estimated costs. So we've estimated the maximum cost to implement this program as $700,000. This will help pay for developing the program, doing the filing to the Utah Public Service Commission, importantly, hiring our own community experts who will help us design the program in a way that works well for us and for our customers. And it will also help pay for the program to be reviewed by state regulators. So then you might say, well, how do we share that $700,000 implementation cost? What we've devised in the governance agreement is that we would split it among the participating communities in 2 payments over 2 years. And each community's share would be based on their what's called the participation percentage, which is half based on each community's population and half based on each community's electric load. And these are current as of 2019. There is another smaller pot of costs apart from the $700,000 that's shared among all the communities. That's, oh, sorry, I'm skipping ahead. So for Grand County in particular, if you take just Grand County's share of the population and the electric load, then the amount that it would cost for Grand County to participate is $4,218.74, which would be paid for over 2 years. 2021 and 2022. So that is the minimum or baseline amount that Grand County would anticipate covering in order to participate in this program moving forward. I'm going to the right half of the slide now. So how do we ensure that the total $700,000 implementation cost will be covered, even accounting for communities, those among the 23 who may decide not to participate? Because in theory, if we split up the 700,000 using our formula, but then some of the communities don't move forward, well, now we've got a gap between what we have paid for and the 700,000. So the way we resolve that gap is through this concept that I mentioned before of anchor communities. So the anchor communities among themselves commit to paying the $700,000 total, and then their actual payment declines as other communities sign on to the agreement and pay their share. So it's basically, I've heard it described almost like an accordion. So the anchors act as an accordion to fill up all the outstanding unmet costs if needed, but then the accordion also shrinks back down as all of the 23 eligible communities sign on and pay their share. So hopefully that makes sense. And if you've got questions about that, we can go back to that for sure. Based on our conversations to date and who we think has indicated a strong desire to be an anchor community, it looks like Grant County could join on as an anchor if you wanted to, for a total cost of around $11,000 spread over 2 years. And again, that's just based on our current understanding of the conversations and the communities who've so far indicated their interest, and looking at how to split up that total $700,000 amount based on population and electric load, similar to the base participation costs. So just to go over this, this concept of the base minimum payment versus what the anchor payment could be if you would want to be an anchor. So if you look at the maximum commitment, Grant County would be looking at around $11,000, we think. This is assuming that only the anchoring communities would participate, but of course we expect that many others will join on as well. So that's the maximum commitment. The actual cost that Grand County would incur, even if it signed on as an anchor, is probably somewhere between this base amount of $4,218 and the maximum of $11,000. And that's because other communities will jump on board and participate, and therefore the actual anchor payment for Grand County and all the other anchors would shrink proportionately. And again, as I said, the minimum amount for Grand County to participate, which is based on the notion that all 23 eligible communities would participate, is this $4,218.74. And again, these are staggered over 2 years because we had gotten feedback that all the costs would be easier if split into 2 parts, which I think makes a lot of sense, and also makes sense for Salt Lake City. So, and then in terms of the payment timeline, so in 2021, the next big dates that we're anticipating is that we are hoping to distribute, well, we're hoping to line up our anchor communities no later than April. And once we've got at least 5 anchor communities who sign on, then we will put pen to paper. We will list all the anchor communities and their maximum anchor payments. We will then distribute that to the remainder of the 23 eligible communities and ask them to sign on. So that's, we had hoped March and April, but it may now more be like April and May. April for the anchors, May for distributing to all of the eligible communities. And then the first major deadline in the agreement is July 31st, 2021. So for communities who want to be able to vote on program design matters, they would need to sign on no later than the July 31 date. And that is also when the phase 1 payments are due. So that the first part of that payment that's split over 2 years. And then by October 31st, for anchor communities that are cities, they then need to make their phase 1 anchor payments. Grand County is not a city, but is a county. So if Grand County decided to sign on as an anchor, that anchor payment actually wouldn't be due until 2022 by the end of January. And then also, like I said, for those who don't really care to vote and design the program, they'll have a last chance opportunity to sign on to this community renewable energy program by January 31st of 2022. And then we sort of repeat in 2022 what we did in 2021. The phase 2 initial payments are due by July 31st of 2022. By October 31st, the anchor payments are due for those that are cities. And then for those that are counties, the second anchor payment would be due by January 31st of 2023. And so far we've been talking about all the kind of the startup costs. If and when Grand County kind of went through all the steps, signed on to the governance agreement, voted on program design, we submit a program application to the Public Service Commission, the Public Service Commission approves it. At the very end of all of that, Grand County would have the choice. Do we pass an ordinance? That ordinance sort of finalizes participation in the program. And if you did that, then you would anticipate some additional costs, which are noticing costs. And basically that's because right before and right after this program would start, and people would be getting their bills in the mail, and it would have this new line item on it for Community Renewable Energy Program, they all have the opportunity to opt out. So we, as the participating communities, would need to pay for those opt-out notices. Two specifically are called out in the legislation. So Grand County, based on current number of customers and current estimated costs, would look to pay an additional $2,435.42 for those noticing costs, 2023 or 2024, we think. So that's the payment timeline. And then just to go over again, kind of the next important steps. March and April, or I should now say April and May, the governance agreement is finalized and ready to be signed. It goes into effect once 5 communities sign. In May and June is when we would look to start engaging the utility, Rocky Mountain Power, to basically design the program and ultimately create a utility agreement. By the end of 2022, or just the very first part of that should say 2021. Anyway, by January of 2022, we would look to submit our joint program application to the Utah Public Service Commission. We could see then a decision by the Public Service Commission by September. And then so that would put our last ordinance passage to finalize participation in December of 2022. And at that time, we would also look to issue our first RFP, or request for proposals, for new renewable energy sources. So we have a lot of kind of, what would I call it, back office type of stuff that we need to get in place before we get to the really exciting stuff, which is actually bringing new utility scale renewable energy sources online so that our customers can be benefiting from a cleaner electricity mix. I think that is all I have. I've included a final slide with my name and cell phone number and email address. So please, if you have additional questions after today's meeting, please reach out. But let me just pause there and ask, are there any questions from the commission?
I just had a couple questions, and they're really simple, I think. So the $11,000, if you're an anchor community, just to reiterate, is split over 2 years?
Correct.
Is that, okay. So it's $5,500 a year, basically.
Yes.
Ish. And then the other one I noted, just in our packet, it said minimum costs. And one of the things that it mentioned is that Rocky Mountain Power customers will simply be purchasing electricity from Rocky Mountain Power as they were before, but rates may reflect slightly higher and or slightly lower. Can you give us a little bit of, I mean, do you have some averages on that? Like, I tried to do some quick research, but it was pretty, you know, like just an average of a kilowatt per hour of wind compared to solar compared to a non-renewable, just so we have an idea of, you know, what our citizens might be facing.
Yes, it's a great question. I think it's the most important question on everybody's mind. Unfortunately, it's a little bit complicated to answer. And so we actually...
I was getting that. Go ahead, sorry.
Yes. So what we have going for us is that wind and solar are some of the very cheapest new resources that can be built. And in fact, in many parts of the country, new renewable energy actually costs less than continuing to run old coal plants. So we've seen an amazing cost decline that makes renewable energy extremely affordable and very competitive with even existing renewable energy sources. Now, having said that, the amount that the program participants, you know, our residents and businesses would actually pay for the program is made more complicated because of a few factors. One is, okay, what is the cost of the new renewable energy sources we would procure? But also, what is the benefit that those resources bring to the overall grid? And so between those costs and benefits, you may end up with a slightly higher rate, a slightly lower rate over time. There's another important bucket here, which I think is of key importance to Rocky Mountain Power. There is some of the existing grid that they will want and expect our customers to be paying for. So we'll be paying for some new, some old, and so that will be a complicated negotiation with Rocky Mountain Power. And through that negotiation, we'll actually need to create these estimates so that we'll say, okay, over the next 10 years, what do we expect program rates to be versus standard offer rates? And we should be able to give an estimate or a projection later this year on what we expect that estimate to be.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think in the end, we're all committed to cleaner energy. It's just, you know, we don't want a family to be paying 4 times what they are. You know, if it's a really small cost difference, then I think everybody would be really supportive of it. But, you know, I'm just looking at kind of like the average family, you know.
100%. I totally agree with you. And I think that designing the program in a way that, you know, that it's affordable, but that also, you know, complies with the laws and is acceptable to Rocky Mountain Power. I mean, it's going to take some doing. It's a needle that we have to thread. But I think that is our strong desire, is that we create an affordable program. We do have in the interlocal agreement, we have, it's hard to put rules around something that we don't know the answer to yet, but we're trying to do that in the interlocal agreement, where we're saying, before this new agency would procure any new resource, we would look at the total costs of the new resource plus any existing resources we had already acquired. And if through our analysis, we see that the program costs are greater than 10% more than what standard offer would be for those same customers, it requires a supermajority vote of both the number of participating communities and a supermajority of the total participating electric load of all the participating communities to procure that. So it basically just sets this super high bar that if it's higher than 10%, or it's 10% or more than standard offer. So that was our way to say, we really, really hope it is not any more than 10% more.
Thank you, Chris. That helps a lot.
Yeah, thanks, Chris, for coming to present. I've been having a lot of conversations about this program, and I'm pretty excited about Grand County choosing to pursue it because, like Chris explained, I think it's one of the only ways that we will get utility scale renewable energy. It's a way of working with Rocky Mountain Power and hiring the experts that are necessary to embark upon these negotiations. And we're charting new territory. So to me, it seems like a small cost to pay over 2 years, whether we're talking about the anchor community cost of $11,000 or just the regular cost. But I wanted to bring it to the commission right now because I think we should consider being an anchor community to try to get this program off the ground. And to address some of Trisha's concerns, I also agree that cost is a major thing. And I was talking to Carly Castle with Moab City, and I believe each city or county or each community is going to develop a low income option or start to think about what that might look like for certain members of the community. So that's something to be decided. And then there's also the opt-out option where people don't have to be part of this program, even if Grand County signs up. But I think that being an anchor community, it gives us a little bit more voice at the table. And if you look at the other communities who have committed to being anchor communities, they're mostly more urban. It's Salt Lake City, it's maybe Summit County. And I think that having a unified voice with Castle Valley, Moab City, Grand County, all also choosing to be anchor communities and put up a little extra upfront cost, it sends a really strong message that rural Utah wants the chance to develop economically in the renewable energy sector, and that we want to host these projects and that we want to see this kind of program flourish. And so, I mean, I'd be curious to talk to Chris about the budget. I haven't looked deeply at the budget, so I'm not sure exactly where Grand County stands with adding costs like that, but I am very much in support of this sort of program. And I think it sends a good message to be an anchor community.
One thing I had failed to mention, but basically, so in terms of the voting, and we didn't really dig deep into this, but most matters would be determined by a simple majority vote of the participating communities. However, any two communities can ask for a weighted vote. And if they ask for a weighted vote, then the vote is determined by participation percentages. And so the anchor communities actually, by making an additional financial commitment, get some extra voting power through the participation percentage. And we would love it.
Could you share your screen, please?
Oh, yes.
Then I can see the commission. Evan, this wasn't the first time this has been presented to us, correct? I remember we voted to participate before, and we were in the process. And then I don't know if it was COVID hit, but then it seemed to kind of
My understanding is that Grand County passed the initial resolution, which lets us be a part of this program, but then there's just these steps that we need to continually affirm. So we need to sign the interlocal agreement to continue to be a part of the project. And myself and Elaine have taken on shepherding it through. Zachariah was focused on it before.
Okay, I could see it also helping, maybe eventually with diversifying our economy.
Yeah, Elaine and I and Carly Castle have had some interesting conversations about what that might look like and trying to encourage somebody locally to submit a project once the request for proposals goes out for Grand County and look at really locally based utility scale projects. It's hard, it's a little unknown because the Public Service Commission needs to okay that project ultimately. And just for folks' information, it seems like there's two paths that could take. Rocky Mountain Power could take take the asset, take control of the power supply, or part of the proposal could be that the business maintains its own ownership and Rocky Mountain Power buys the power from them. So this is potentially an opportunity for, I mean, all of Southern Utah to develop economically, but Grand County specifically.
Well, I was excited about it before, and I'm still excited about it. I'd like to hear from the rest of the commissioners.
Yeah,
Evan?
Can you hear me all right?
I can't hear you, Evan. Are you talking?
I was, yeah.
Evan is coming through, but it's very soft.
Christopher, are you unable to take your screen down?
I apologize. I thought I'll stop my sharing.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Christopher. It's just easier for me to know who wants to talk. Thank you.
I'm with you now.
Okay,
Can you hear me any better or no?
just a little better.
I'm for it.
Sideways.
When we signed the original resolution to participate, I was on board with it then, and I'm appreciative of Sarah picking it up and keeping the momentum going. And if the time is now to make the next moves, I see being one of the core members would make sense. So.
Yeah, I too am very much in favor of it. My family committed to solar 10 years ago with our home and our business, and I think it's one of the best investments we've ever done. I think it would be a great investment for our community as well.
I'm also fine with it. I think Sarah makes good points. I don't think this is hugely expensive compared to our overall budget, and it seems like the program is thoughtfully designed with a lot of safety valves for in case costs get out of control. So.
Gabriel?
I view this very positively.
Trish?
Yeah, I was like I said, I was a little concerned about the long-term effects on families and their power bills, but I think Sarah and Chris, were able to outline that really well. So.
And I agree with you. I think that's one thing we need to really look at, because we have, quite a few families in this community that, have a hard time making ends meet. And so if we work as Moab City, Castle Valley, the town of Castle Valley and Grand County, I'm sure we can come up with a fund or a means or some way to, they can either opt out, or if they want to participate, we could help. So anyway, I think we can come up with some solution for that. So you're going to spearhead this for us, Sarah?
Yeah, I'll make sure to get the interlocal agreement on for our next meeting and follow up with Barrett and Chris.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Is there anything else? Well, I'm excited. Christopher, thank you for your presentation. It was very thorough.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
We are to general business action items, discussion and consideration of. First one is approving letter of support for recreational trail programs fully funding act. Cliff Kuntz.
Chair, can I interrupt? It's 6:05. Did you want to do a second citizens to be heard?
Thank you. Sometimes I just, do we have any, we are at our second citizens to be heard. Do we have any citizens that wish to be heard? Mallory?
Yes, we had somebody on, it just says iPhone joined. So if you're on for public comment, please press *6. And we also had somebody, forgive me, I'm going to say this incorrectly, I believe, Patina join. If you're on for public comment, please press *6 to unmute.
Doesn't look like they're on for public comment. Anyone else?
No, Mary, I think that that is everyone at this time.
Okay, thank you. Well, we will move on to our action items. Cliff Kuntz. He was on earlier. I don't see him now.
Yeah, I'm not seeing Cliff on. I could try to cover this in his absence.
You want to do that, or do we want to move to item J?
Or table, yeah. I mean, just briefly, this is a grant program that we've made use of extensively for non-motorized recreation. And I think that, you know, Cliff on the motorized side's made use of it also. But every year we generally get an RTP grant. And so keeping this program running, I think, is important for our non-motorized trail budget. And then probably helps out with Cliff and Ride with Respect on their end also.
Hey, Chris, do you know what percentage of the money goes to motorized versus non-motorized trail or maintenance or whatever?
I don't know. No, I think I recall seeing a split maybe from Cliff in the, or no, it's just a 50-50 match required. So I have no idea actually what the percentage between the two is.
I guess I'd be interested in getting more information about how the funds have been spent in the past, both in Grand County and nationally, before acting on this. So
okay,
if it were possible to postpone until the next meeting, I think that would be good.
Yeah, I will agree with you, Kevin. I mean, we received that one email from Neon. I think he does a pretty good job of looking at things comprehensively. And he just recommended that we table it until we have a chance to look a little more in depth of, you know, where that money is going. And I would agree with you, Kevin.
Now, this is a national program, correct, Chris? And
yeah, I mean, it's federal, so I'd assume it's national.
Yeah, I'm sorry, that was a very good question. But
probably
would the county decide how we would use the money that comes to us? We have to ask for it, correct?
We do for our purposes, although I don't think that they limit their grants to just Grand County. I think that they also offer grants to nonprofits.
Okay. Was that a motion, Kevin?
Sure, yes. I move to postpone this until the next meeting.
Motion by Phone, seconded by Tricia Dean. Discussion? All in favor of postponing? Yes. All opposed? Postponed. Thank you. We are now to approving amendment to Scenic View Inn Development Agreement. Chris Baird and Christina Sloan.
Okay, so the Scenic View Inn, according to our Assured Housing Ordinance, is required to build 4 affordable housing units or to pay a fee in lieu as calculated based on that ordinance and the square footage of their hotel. And they've got 2 units built and otherwise are ready for their certificate of occupancy to be awarded, but there are still 2 remaining affordable housing units that they haven't been able to get built, partly due to COVID, making availability of materials difficult and financing as well. And so what I proposed to them would that they could get a surety bond for the proportion of the fee in lieu that's relative to those 2 units. And then this agreement provides them with 1 year after their certificate of occupancy is provided to either build the units surrender the collateral to the county, and we'd put that money into our affordable housing fund. And so it's kind of it's not something that is, you know, an option necessarily in the land use code, but it's also not precluded, and there aren't necessarily any timelines in the assured housing ordinance. And so I think that this is permissible on a case-by-case basis if the commission agrees with it. The owner of the hotel has signed it already, and so they're in agreement with it. But I think that given the circumstances, this is a good way to move forward and to compromise with the developer, given you know, circumstances with COVID. We are in a bubble right now where construction materials are about 50% more expensive than they normally would be. Hopefully that bubble will go down because it could affect county projects as well, but it is a unique circumstance. And so I drafted this agreement, Christina's reviewed it, and together we've come up with before you today. Answer any questions if you have them.
Do we have any questions from the commission?
If we didn't approve this, would they not be given their certificate of occupancy until they did provide the 2 extra units of housing?
Yeah, I think that's what would have to happen. They'd either have to build them or pay us the fee in lieu.
And is there a reason they don't want to just pay us the fee in lieu right now?
Well, I think that the fee in lieu is probably going to be more expensive than building the units.
Okay. Thanks.
The surety bond is also more of like an insurance policy than an escrow agreement, for instance. And so when you get a surety bond, you pay a premium, basically, and that premium is lost. You know, it's like an insurance policy. And so if they fail to make good on this agreement, then the company that carries the bond will pay us. But you know, the developer, I'm not sure, you know, what the ramifications for not complying and then failing to pay are on the individual's credit ratings, et cetera. But the way it works for us, and this is the way that we do it commonly for a lot of developments, we accept a surety bond from a company that's licensed to do surety in Utah. And so it's a very common thing for us.
So if I'm understanding correctly, then after a year, the units will either get built or we'll get the equivalent of the fee in lieu.
Yeah.
So I'll go ahead and move to approve the amended development agreement for the Scenic View Inn.
Motion, Evan, seconded by Jacques. Discussion?
Out of curiosity, which is the where's the Scenic View Inn?
It's
This is the one that's it's the RV park that's just north of the big huge project that's just north of Danette's Sage Creek. It's the hotel just north of Sage Creek.
Yeah, Dab Flats is what it used to be called, if you're familiar with that.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, it's basically across from like the road that goes into Hidden Valley. Angel, yeah.
Okay, motion, any other discussion? Call for a vote. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? I'm assuming Evan, are you there?
I'm in favor.
Thank you, Evan. So passes
Is
unanimous.
my sound any better?
Much better, much better.
Okay.
Thank you. Passes unanimously. We are now to approving budget appropriation for Thompson Springs cleanup effort. Commissioner Hadeen.
Okay, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to turn off my camera once again. So first of all, I want to really thank you guys for considering this. I found a special place in my heart for this community, and Mary has spent quite a bit of time going out, visiting that community, coming to meetings. So we've been having weekly meetings on, it really began with the idea that there was a really just large fire issues out there, and just attempting to mitigate those fire issues. So there was a fairly large fire in December, and basically it was really lucky that it didn't spread because of the amount of, you know, debris that exists out there, and specifically in a certain part of town. And so after quite a bit of efforts with the special fire district, Grand County Planning and Zoning, they've been coming to every meeting. The Southeastern Utah Health Department, they've been coming to every meeting. The commissioners, the Solid Waste District, Evan Tyrell's been amazing. Monument Waste, more recently, we've come up with the idea of doing like an initial cleanup. And we really feel that if we can get the commitment of the county to assist with that, and that just little bump of revitalization, that we can continue that process, that community will be a little more apt to maintain the cleanliness of their community. Our hope is to do that initial cleanup, and then eventually there's a large portion of that community that is, the zoning is all off, so to do a replat, and the platting is off, so a replat and rezone, and specifically it's in one portion of that community. And then after that, looking at maybe larger grant opportunities to extend that revitalization. So we're asking for a sum of money for that initial cleanup. That's it, Mary. Do you want to add anything, Mary?
I think it's important. I believe Trish brought it up, or somebody brought it up, that we haven't, as a county, put any money into Thompson Springs on my tenure on the commission, and I don't remember anything before. So I think it's long overdue that we start to realize that that little town that's seen better days is part of our jurisdiction and our responsibility.
Thank you for that comment, Mary. And, you know, one thing that Gabe and I talked about recently was, you know, is that the next, you know, is that going to be the outlying community, feeder community to Moab? And I think it is going to be one of those communities. So that's something to think about, getting our ducks in a row now before that community grows.
It was a satellite community during the uranium boom, and when the railroad was more active. So do I have a motion? Trish, you want to make a motion?
Sure, I'll make a motion. I will make a motion to approve budget appropriations for the Thompson Springs cleanup efforts in the amount of $7,500.
Motion, Tricia Dean, seconded by Jacques Adler. Discussion?
Yeah, I just want to say, I think that this this effort and this initial cleanup, as Trish said, will really allow for a thorough assessment of needs moving forward, and will really put us in a position to assist Thompson Springs in procuring other funding for further efforts. So I think it's really important in that respect. I just wanted to ask, what is our, can someone remind me, I don't know if, Chris, real quick, the discretionary fund, what's that total amount for the year?
20,000.
20,000. Okay, thank you.
So yeah, and also just for clarity in the minutes, we're talking about a $7,500 expenditure appropriation from the commission's discretionary fund.
Okay.
Thanks, Chris.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? Passes unanimously.
Thanks so much, guys.
Wait, what about Evan? Does Evan supports it?
Yes.
Yes. I just heard him say yes.
We are now
showing up on the Brady Bunch screen.
No, you're not showing up on the Brady Bunch. Approving approving letter to Bureau of Land Management requesting mitigation of crowding on local trails. Commissioner Walker.
All right, so this letter is a follow-up to a conversation we had with the BLM a month or two ago. And it's in that conversation, we discussed various crowding issues and that the BLM needs to start a planning process. And BLM says they recognize the problem and planning is going to take a long time. And this letter just formally asks them to start. And it lists a bunch of things we're hoping they will consider. It's clear that we're not endorsing all of these. We just think they should be on the list of options that we're looking at. Christina stuck a second version of the letter in there, and I think the only difference is in her version, it says something about prioritization. And I actually think that's unnecessary. I think if possible, they should try to do all those areas, and if they can't, we can discuss that later, but I don't think this initial letter is the appropriate place to, to begin that sort of negotiation, since we can easily communicate with the BLM in other ways.
Well, and if I could speak to that, I did add really just 2 references. One is in the first paragraph where I reordered the locations and then added prioritize in that order. And then right before the list of ideas, I added focusing first on the Sand Flats recreation area. I did that because I was part of that meeting. And in that meeting, we discussed a planning effort for Sand Flats. We did not discuss asking the BLM to initiate this much larger area. And even though it's not quite countywide, these are, Cane Creek, Flat Pass, these are big areas. We did talk in the context of that meeting that to do something bigger, something countywide, something really impactful, the BLM recommends using the public lands bills process like what they went through in Emory County, which of course is a big deal. We need to use Representative Curtis's office to help us with that. It would take many years. But the BLM was really engaged and interested in starting on some planning in Sand Flats. And part of that, of course, is we have existing infrastructure and income to help pay for the planning. So then Kevin wrote this letter, which I felt like was very different than what we had talked about in the meeting. And I did reach out to Jim Jones, who clarified that, yes, they don't have the resources to start planning all of this stuff outside of a public lands bill process and appropriation for that, and that they will be prioritizing, so that they do recommend we prioritize for them, or they are going to choose how they prioritize this list we're giving them. So it seems to me in our best interest to prioritize this list. So you may disagree with the way I've prioritized it, but I do recommend we prioritize how we want them to approach this.
So my memory of that conversation is that we did discuss the importance of spillover effects. Like if we were to put a permit system in Sand Flats, that's going to increase the pressure on Flat Pass and poison spiders especially. I also think that this is very far from a countywide thing in terms of either acreage or percentage of roots. It's probably more like 3 or 4% or something tiny. I just think it would be a disaster if they put something in place only for Sand Flats, and then it's going to take an additional 2 years to try to think about what happens at Cane Creek, which suddenly has twice as much use because of what they did in Sand Flats. So to me, it seems very sensible. I think we did discuss it, and I think if the BLM doesn't have the resources, they can write back to us and say that. Finally, I think if the BLM prioritized things, I don't think it would be any different from our prioritization. So I don't think it's critically important that we, in this letter, say how we want to prioritize things.
May I ask a question?
Certainly, Trish.
As to the nature of the meeting, I guess I just, when I first read this, I was a little, and I went back and it said after a meeting, I was a little taken aback. It was like, I don't, I personally don't think, we want to come off as telling a federal land management agency what to do. And so that was my initial response. And so I guess I just want to understand the meeting a little bit more. And is this just a kind of just a synopsis of what went on in the meeting? Just reiterating, can you kind of give me just a feel for that, Kevin?
Actually, I'm trying to remember. It was a meeting that many of us were in attendance. I don't know if it was a quorum publicly noticed meeting or something more.
There wasn't a quorum.
Was not a quorum.
Commissioners on it.
Okay. But I think just to give you a little bit more background, part of the meeting was just general concern about, management of federal lands in our backyard, but we also put a heavy emphasis on the interaction between noise in our neighborhoods and usage of BLM land, and what in these areas that I included in the letter, what they have in common are those are the places where one might be tempted to drive from town to that trailhead. So it's not every crowded area in the county. It's the ones that are immediately adjacent to our community where I think we have an enhanced interest in how the federal lands are managed, because it is affecting noise in our neighborhoods.
So Trish, also just to confirm, the BLM did ask us to formally request that we start a planning process at Sand Flats. And that's what we discussed.
Okay, thank you. That helps. Yeah.
In my opinion, it's broader than what they asked us to do.
Okay, yeah. I just didn't want it coming out of the. Yeah, I just didn't want it coming out of the blue that we were sending some letter telling them, how to manage, their land. So that helps a lot. Thank you.
I think Christina is probably correct that the BLM probably mentioned planning only for Sand Flats, and they may have asked for a letter that was specific to Sand Flats. I think that's a mistake. I do not want to send them that kind of letter because I think because of the spillover effects. So.
Any
with that in mind, if we are trying to lump some more in with the Sand Flats effort, I might go with the prioritized version, just so that if they read it, they say, oh, well, they want us to start with Sand Flats, so let's start there. But I can see the value in including the mention of the other spillover or zones. So how do you feel about that, Kevin?
About
approving Christina's letter.
I think I don't want to make it easy for them to do less than I think what they ought to be doing. And I would rather that they say, we looked hard and we thought, and we just can't plan all these areas at once. I don't want to sort of concede that point before we even get any official communication from them.
I'm just wondering if the Sand Flats is more low-hanging fruit because there's already so much management in place that I don't want to back burner the whole thing when there's something that we can just get real quick.
But I, as I said before, I think having a plan in place only for Sand Flats could be counterproductive. One could argue that it's worse than no plan at all because it increases the pressure in all these other areas where we don't have the Sand Flats management team and that are less well equipped. I mean, we have more intensive management happening at Sand Flats. And so that place is better able to handle crowds of users. If we start limiting that and thus accelerating, usage increase in other nearby areas, I think we could end up worse off than if we did nothing. So I think.
Well, my input on that is the BLM is a master planner. They're much better at it than the county is. And so I do think they will be taking, they're going to consider the spillover effects. I also don't, I can understand what you're saying about Sand Flats already being managed. At the same time, we don't have any reservation system. And that was something we specifically discussed, was studying a reservation system for both campsites and trails up there. But if you'll recall, the BLM was really focused on Poison Spider Mesa as being one of the most overused and under-infrastructured trails we have. So they might prioritize planning at Poison Spider Mesa if we don't prioritize for them. So I do think it's important, and again, we can prioritize it however y'all think we should, but we're asking them to look at all these areas. I think they will, but they are going to prioritize based on resources. And I would rather us give them feedback about what that priority is.
Yeah, well, I think, the 8 of us discussing this for 20 minutes in a meeting versus the BLM, the master planners, deciding what the bigger priorities are. It's not clear to me that their prioritization would be worse than ours. So I think that combined with the other reasons I've mentioned makes me prefer just to not mention that. And I do want to urge them to plan for an area that includes everything that's easily accessible from Moab, because I think that makes a lot of sense. I think it also makes sense just from the point of view of their resources. You know, if they were to do like 5 separate sequential plans, you know, that could take 10 years if it's 2 years per plan. And I think it's much more efficient to sort of consider them all at once, since the issues in these places are similar. So anyway, I think we should move on, so we can either just.
Well, you can make a motion.
Yeah, and if that doesn't fail, then we'll try the other one. Or if it doesn't succeed, we'll try the other one. So,
Do we have a? Okay.
I move to approve the letter, and I mean letter number 1, to the Bureau of Land Management requesting mitigation of crowding on local trails.
Do I have a second?
I'll second Commissioner Walker's draft letter.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All in favor is 5. All opposed?
I think it might have been 6 in favor, or maybe someone.
Sarah, how did you vote,
I
Sarah?
voted for it.
Oh, okay, I didn't see your hand. So that the motion passes 6-1. One in opposition.
No, Mary Priestley's a cat in the picture. It's very.
I know he's wanting my attention. I'm going to have to probably kick him out.
No, let him or her stay.
Okay, so motion passes 6-1 with Tricia Dean in opposition. Approving letter to Governor Cox requesting amendment to House Bill 297. Commissioner Stock.
Thank you. I'm going to give a little background for the public and those of you that haven't been following this issue. So HB 297 outlines the creation of the Colorado River Authority of Utah, hence sets aside $9 million for a legal defense fund. The mission of that authority is to protect, conserve, use, and develop Utah's waters of the Colorado River system. During the last legislative session, there were discussions within Grand County about us trying to intervene and possibly get an amendment that would allow for more direct representation to our region, because the way the bill is written, it's just the Division of Water Resources, which clearly the director of the Division of Water Resources, who clearly has too broad of a scope to be able to intimately represent Grand County. The bill also allows for broad usage of closed meetings. In fact, it's anytime any interstate claim to the waters of the Colorado River are being discussed, they have the authority to go into closed session. And I think this creates a concerning lack of transparency on, let's see. So we weren't able to prioritize taking action on the bill during the session because it was moving so quickly and we had some other large priorities. However, I had reached out to the Ute Business Council, their legislative body, and of the Northern Ute tribe to see if they had concerns about the bill. And in the last days of the session, I heard back from their attorney that in fact the Northern Utes did have concerns and were very concerned about, and we're going to request an amendment that clarified that the Colorado River Authority could not interfere or diminish any of the tribe's federally held reserved water rights. The bill language makes clear that the Water Authority cannot interfere with state water rights, but is not explicit about the federally reserved rights. And I just want to make it clear that the Northern Ute tribe and the state of Utah have a complicated past in regards to water rights. There are lawsuits about this, as well as an unratified Ute Water Compact and the ongoing need for a settlement. And this letter is in no way trying to intervene in that complicated history or relationship. The proposed water authority would not be the body responsible for moving those processes with the tribe forward, nor is it the arena where the settlements will be decided. So our letter is simply supporting the ask for clarification and assurance that the water authority cannot impact Indian reserved water rights. The Colorado River, as you know, is over-allocated, meaning there are more paper water rights than actual wet water, and all 7 of the basin states and the tribes of the region have to grapple with that reality and also to consider the effects of ongoing drought and climate change on our shared water supply. I think this should be done in the public sphere, allowing for increased understanding of issues, acceptance of climate science, and with the tribes at the table who hold large amounts of undeveloped water rights. It's well accepted within the Bureau of Reclamation and also academia that lawsuits and litigation is not going to solve the region's water problems alone. Lawsuits move slower than the drought is acting. I'm concerned that the Water Authority would favor secretive litigation-based approach to water problems versus the open, collaborative, and scientific approach pursued by many. So in the hopes of a future with greater collaboration with Native American tribes of the Colorado River Basin, I think we should support the Ute Business Council in their request for an amendment clarifying the powers of this authority. They specifically asked Grand County to do this, and I believe it's the right thing to do. So if there are any questions, let me know.
I read in the Salt Lake Tribune, there was a article, I tried to find it for, and then I got busy on something else, but it was specifically asking Governor, saying bills that Governor Cox should veto. And this was one of them. Because of lack of transparency. They didn't mention anything about the Ute tribe in the trib. They just said that they were real concerned about the fact that there were so many possibilities for them to not have public meetings.
Yeah, I really like the last paragraph of the letter, highlighting the changes to the Open and Public Meetings Act. Also, you know, Moab is the only municipality on the banks of the Colorado River in Utah. So I think that it's makes sense for our community to have some more representation on that board. And so I'm wondering if there's almost a letter in itself right there without mentioning any of the tribal stuff, but you've got your finger on the pulse of this a lot more than I do. I'm just wondering it seems like we're bringing up a lot of points, and I wonder if it's worth focusing on just a few of them.
Yeah, I thought a lot about that because Grand County's interests are definitely different from the Ute tribes. I think this is a good opportunity, though. I mean, I reached out to the tribe. The reservation exists within Grand County. I was curious what they were thinking on it, and I know that dialogue hasn't been that strong between the Northern Ute tribe and Grand County on past issues. And I think we could all agree that we'd like to develop that relationship and those dialogues. So I'm really interested in supporting their ask. It seems like a simple request and also would open the door to future collaboration.
Hoping to weigh in also, because I did work on this bill and I worked with Mark Stilson, our regional engineer, and I really support Sarah's effort here and also supporting the tribe. And I think it's really great that she reached out to them, and I absolutely encourage fostering that relationship. But I don't think this is the right step at the right time. And I want to encourage the commission to really be sophisticated politically about how we approach bills like this. And, in looking at the proposed amendment, in my opinion, it's legally unnecessary. And Mark Stilson makes this point too in his email that's below the documentation that Sarah provided. It actually doesn't reference state water rights. It references any water right within the state. So Federal Reserve water rights are already part of what this process is going to do and consider. And it's true that, the Ute, like Grand County, the Ute tribe does need representation, but Mark Stilson provided some steps instead of reaching out to the governor, because that is going to get press. And quite frankly, the bill is not going to be amended. And so, I don't think that's the right move before we spend time on some of the steps that Mark has recommended. So his point was that in a bill that was actually passed last year, but is going to work with this authority bill, there are watershed councils that are supposed to be working with the authority, and we should work to work through that process. He also recommended the regional engineer in Vernal, who is sort of going to be the lead on negotiations with the Ute tribe. He recommended reaching out to him before we send a letter to the governor. He recommended that we recruit San Juan County's help and support to draft a joint letter to Andrew Dotson or our DWR representative, which is the state director. And so to take that approach, to absolutely be involved in the process, absolutely support the Ute tribe through the process, but not make it this political issue with the governor's office, which I just don't think is the right move. And then I also reached out to Casey Hill, our lobbyist, about a veto on a different bill, because that HB 98, if you recall, that pretty aggressive bill that changed a lot of planning and building requirements. And after the fact, it was discovered that it might jeopardize like massive sort of insurance regulation and protections in the state of Utah because of floodplain considerations. So there's there's some folks that are asking the governor to veto it. And I said, hey, Casey, what's the process with asking the governor for vetoes or changes, and should we weigh in? And he said, absolutely not. All caps, I strongly recommend against it. I don't remember his exact language, but it basically was like, it's not a politically sophisticated way to move through the system, and use UAC to work that angle. Or for example, I think his recommendation here would be, use Mark Stilson in the DWR office, who is going to be in these meetings, who is going to keep us up to date, who's provided us with specific individuals and their contacts with a way forward before we take this political move. So I just would encourage you guys to really ponder the impact.
So, I mean, I certainly agree that we should think about the political implications of this, both positive and negative. And I think Sarah outlined some of the positive things, and I agree with her. It's pretty hard to establish a relationship with a Northern Ute tribe, and that relationship could be very useful in the future. And so I would be inclined to do it unless there's a serious downside to doing this. I think the scenario you gave with the other bill was different in that there's a real chance that bill will get vetoed and they'll be looking for a scapegoat. I think that's what was in Casey's email. Whereas in this thing, if I'm understanding you correctly, this bill probably isn't going to be changed. If it is, and the thing we're asking for is, you said legally unnecessary, so it seems kind of innocuous. And so based on that, and also based on reading Mark Stilson's letter, it just didn't seem that there was much downside to doing this, compared to the upside, which I think is real. Now, maybe I'm missing something, or maybe I misread Mark's letter. I mean, I agree that there's lots of other things we could and should be doing on water, but I think if the Ute tribe, which is hard to establish in a relationship with, is asking for a simple favor, I'm inclined to do that simple favor unless there's pretty clear reasons that would be a mistake for us. So.
Sarah,
I think it's oftentimes really important to take a stand and help. And even, like I remember when we were doing I think it was a resolution or a letter asking not to have UTVs and ATVs in the park. There were a lot of people that were saying we were making a real mistake to take a stand, that it was going to hurt us politically, that all of this was going to happen, but we decided to take the stand, and it did help keep UTVs and ATVs out of the park. So I think sometimes you make decisions based on what you feel is right, as opposed to what you think politically might, sometimes it's, I don't think this is going to burn much political capital, in other words.
I guess, and I invite Christina to respond if she thinks that it is going to burn political credit. But in what you said initially, it sounded like it was like mostly how this was either unnecessary or how there's other things we could do. But neither of those is saying that this is going to hurt us by doing this. So
Sure,
that,
I think it's going to burn political capital. And I think that, every time we complain after the fact, it hurts us. The love communications was another one that I recommended against. The commission approved it, it burned us. But, but I can totally appreciate taking a stand for the tribe, and I totally support that. And it's totally your decision. But I worked every day for 6 weeks within the general session, and I can tell you moves like this hurt us. They just do.
Sarah, can you, did you approach them or did they approach you?
I reached out just about their opinion.
Okay, so you approached them.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think that should be understood that they didn't reach out to counties for support. We approached them, and I think I would be more receptive to supporting this. I mean, I'm in support of it, but more receptive to supporting it if other counties, surrounding counties, were on board. And maybe we choose to table it until other counties get on board. But I'm a little hesitant for sure. Because one of the things that you said, Sarah, was that it would not intervene in that relationship that's really contentious. And I think us supporting one of those entities does intervene in that relationship. Very much so. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, it does send a message that we think that the tribe's claim to water is somewhat legitimate. And like, I think that's an important thing to send a message about and get press on, especially in the next, I mean, this is all Colorado River politics, and I would love Grand County to be more involved, but I also understand our scope is maybe a little bit more narrow, but in the next 5 years, there are big changes coming on the Colorado River with interstate governance of that body of water. And the tribes have a lot to lose, and they also, like in general, have paper water rights and not real water rights. And this is a huge issue that I think that we should be vocal about. But I also don't want to like interfere with the Ute Water Compact specifically. I don't know all the details on that, so I can't advise on that. So I just wanted to make clear that we were just supporting this amendment, not something bigger.
Right. Okay. Okay.
Okay, so my last comment maybe, I'm sorry, go ahead, Evan.
I was just wondering if this would be something to address to the state engineer, if they're kind of taking the lead on this, or if you really see this going to the governor's desk. And I also wonder if it's worth taking some time to see if San Juan County wants to join on this or a similar letter, kind of requesting some representation for us.
What's the time frame for getting the governor's signature on the bill?
Excuse me, Jacques, I couldn't understand you.
What is the time frame for getting the governor's signature or amendment on the bill?
As far as I know, it could be any minute. It does show online that has not been signed yet. But it is in the governor's office, according to the last action on the legislative page.
But if I understand correctly, we're not asking him to veto the bill or not sign it. It's just endorsing some future amendment in the indefinite future.
Honestly, I'm not even sure his power to amend, period, ever. The governor himself, I mean, versus the Utah legislature. And again, I don't think asking the governor to manage an amendment on a bill in the 2022 general session makes sense, but.
Yeah, I mean, I was mostly following up on that direct request from the tribe to give support to their request. And I mean, I understand that maybe that's not the most strategic way to approach Grand County getting representation, direct representation on this board. I'm willing to work towards understanding watershed councils and see how the Moab Area Watershed Partnership wants to engage with the creation of watershed councils, like as trying to address that part of this. But I'm curious, yeah, how you guys feel about just supporting the Utes in their request there, or if we want to go back to them with some other communication.
Yeah, so I think I'm inclined to support this because, you know, for the positive, it does our relationship with the Utes, and I think also all the points about this being not very effective makes it less likely to piss people off. You know, if nothing results of this letter, then no one's going to have, you know, no one's going to be looking for scapegoats, in Casey's words. So to me, that seems kind of safe. And I guess I would be looking, in terms of the downside, I would be looking for something a little bit more specific before it outweighed the upside for me.
Do I have a motion?
Chair, if I may,
Okay,
I move to approve the letter to Governor Cox requesting an amendment to HB 297.
motion by Gabriel Wojtek. Do we have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Kevin Walker. Further discussion? All in favor of Sarah's letter? Raise your hand, say aye. All opposed? Okay, something went flash on me, so opposed were Trish, Jacques, Evan, what were you?
Opposed to this version.
So motion passes 4-3. Jacques Hadler, Shadeen, and Evan Clapper in opposition. Okay, approving Grand County's former position regarding the 191 bypass feasibility. Chris Baird.
All right, so last year in December, the commission had been working partly through the regional transportation process and partly through hotspot funding, and been engaged with the city on some discussions of bypass feasibility. And I think at that time, it wasn't entirely clear what the city's formal position was. The county commission seemed or was generally in favor of continuing to pursue feasibility studies, and in fact budgeted $30,000 for it. Recently at the last city council meeting, it appeared to me that the city council has since then solidified their position as being opposed to further feasibility studies for the bypass in the regional transportation planning process. And they had concerns that the county's continued discussions and inclination toward feasibility the feasibility of bypass could bleed over into a separate planning process, which we proposed to them in an interlocal agreement to join us in a grant that we received for technical planning assistance from the Utah Department of Transportation to ultimately draft and put into effect a unified master transportation plan. So we're pretty long overdue for our update to our transportation plan, and it's possible certainly for us to go it alone and update it and maybe even make use of the technical planning assistance grant that we got from UDOT alone also. But since the decision to move forward with bypass feasibility was made by a prior council, and we've got 4 new commissioners on board now, and also because I don't think that the city's position in December was quite as concrete as it is now, as in terms of being opposed to continuing with feasibility studies for a bypass, that I think we should re-edify our position right now, because it could have implications moving forward with regard to whether or not we can renegotiate with the city their participation in the grant we got from UDOT for technical planning assistance, and also the possibility of moving forward with the concept of a unified transportation plan between both entities. So with that, I'll just turn it over to discussion to the commission.
So Chris, your understanding is that the city turned down the interlocal agreement or voted it down because we are still interested in the feasibility of the bypass.
It was pretty clear, I think. I listened to the meeting.
Yeah.
And, yeah, I think they made it pretty clear that that was the predominant concern, certainly. You know, there was about you know, some maybe transparency issues, but they were probably transparency issues that revolve, strictly speaking, around the bypass feasibility itself. I haven't really been heavily involved with that process, and so I'm not really an expert on what's happened. I think Evan's been more involved than I have, and he can speak to it. You know, I think we do have to question whether or not we should give deference on the subject to the city, being as I don't know what the political feasibility of moving forward without the city's consent is on something like this, at least with regard to a bypass that's in the valley. I know there are other concepts, you know, like for instance, going further down Potash and crossing the river and potentially going perhaps over Hurrah Pass, Cane Creek, Hatch Mesa. I don't know. That sounds pretty far out there too to me, especially considering it's all fairly undeveloped backcountry desert at the moment. But you know, I drafted some fairly binary, rather simple motions, but you know, the commission can certainly refine and come up with some more subtle motion also.
I'm really glad that the city pushed pause on this so that we could actually discuss the bypass. I would be interested in a motion that clarifies that my opinion is that we shouldn't include the bypass in the regional transportation plan. I was reading through the draft regional transportation plan, and it makes mention of the bypass very often. It also makes clear that if we take the bypass out of that plan, that UDOT can't put money towards it, pursuing it. So to me, that's a reason why we should take it out of the plan, because otherwise it gives license to UDOT to move forward with studying. And they mentioned the NEPA EIS process, which this is reminding me a little bit of the Book Cliffs Highway, where they spent $700,000 doing engineering and a NEPA process on the Book Cliffs Highway before they asked for right-of-ways or talked to the landowners right in the way. And so now that process is just dead. That money has already been spent. Like, in the spirit of fiscal conservatism, I think that we should take the bypass out of any of our future planning studies until we let some of these other attempts at alleviating tourist traffic work. Like, Moab has some plans. We need a regional transportation system for transit. We need more, you know, bike paths, things like that. Let some of our other plans work, and then we can always add the bypass in later. They update these plans all the time. That's my 2 cents.
That sounds great, Sarah. Nice.
And we always could take up a feasibility study again in the future, even if we right.
Yeah, I do think there's an asymmetry here in that it's, you know, once something gets on a UDOT project list, it can sometimes be very hard to stop it. Whereas I think it might be a little bit easier to go the other direction. I think the bypass has been studied quite a bit over the years, you know, not just this latest round, but before that. And in all cases, you know, I've been unpersuaded that it's a good idea. I think it causes more harm than good. I think the reason it keeps coming up again and again is, you know, there is a traffic problem downtown and people are looking for solutions. Bypass is the only solution that's been studied to any extent at all. So I'm hoping, and I'll be happy to make a motion, that maybe some of this money could be used for studying downtown redevelopment ideas. My favorite one is something Mary mentioned to me years ago about, you know, just utilizing the backs of the shops and creating pedestrian-friendly spaces and those alleyways between Main Street and 100 East and West. You know, maybe that's a good idea, maybe it isn't, but so far there's been zero formal studies of that. And I think to balance things out, that's what we should emphasize for at least the near term.
Yes, I think I'm comfortable with taking it out of this plan. Only thing that they could do that I would think would be feasible would be so expensive they would never do it. And I think we can solve our issues by redesigning how we walk downtown. When I was a kid, Center Street was Main Street, and that's where everybody walked. And downtown was Highway 191, and then later, I don't know whose idea it was to turn a freeway into Main Street, but I think there's a lot more creative ways to deal with the problem rather than moving the highway, move where we walk. So I agree. Do we have a motion?
I have well, maybe before I make the motion, I was just going to discuss the scope. So, you know, some people have mentioned the reasonable transportation plan and the presence or absence of the bypass on that project list. And I know the city is working on a big, complicated resolution for their next meeting a week from now to do that. I think for that issue, we might want to wait for the city to go first. And with this meeting, just have a much simpler motion. So that's the kind of motion I would make. But if that's insufficient, then I'll defer to
I
someone.
think part of the reason the city is not moving forward, and I don't want to lose this money, this could be very costly. And I think one reason is they want to have surety that the county is not going to, since we're leading the process, that we won't allow the bypass to happen, study. So I want him to know, anyway.
Okay, so in that case, I move to establish a position that the Grand County Commission does not support continued feasibility studies concerning the Highway 191 bypass and to repurpose the $30,000 bypass budget for transportation-related studies and public engagement, including but not limited to options for creating pedestrian-friendly spaces near Main Street.
I'll second that.
So that's the same as Chris's motion, except for what the money is going to be used for.
Motion by Kevin Walker, seconded by Tricia Dean. Further discussion?
My one thing with that add-on about spending money on a downtown plan, I kind of see that as more of a city kind of thing. And so I think creating pedestrian opportunities downtown isn't necessarily something that the county should commit their funds to. You know, if it's a matter of moving that traffic elsewhere to create that that experience, then I think that's something we could talk about, but then that's starting to sound like a bypass.
Yeah, so I tried to phrase it so that we're not committed to spending it that way. It's just that we have the option of doing that, perhaps in collaboration with the city in the future. But it really all it's saying is transportation related. So it's
okay.
So I was going to say that I do think it's worth pointing out that there's, you know, quite a bit of public clamor surrounding this issue. We had a comment from a citizen today. And ultimately, when that $30,000 was included in the budget last year, it was my understanding that $15,000 of it was to be included for a thorough public engagement process, which was something that I was keen on pursuing. I think that it's warranted when you have so much discussion on the topic from the public that a thorough public engagement process is the best way to get an idea of where constituents stand. And I do feel like we justifiably heard from a group of folks in the county that, you know, mostly the folks that are would be most affected by these proposed routes that have been floated out there, and understandably that we would hear from them. And I think following through with the public engagement process, I think that it has the potential to keep this conversation going if we rather than avoiding it altogether. Not saying that, I'm just saying that could be a consequence of this, that it keeps it as a topic of conversation and a point of contention for proponents of the idea. I also think that a public engagement process could serve to bury the idea if that is really what if that's what the studies if that's what sort of the results of the sort of public participation is. With that said, I view the proposed bypass options that have been talked about, say going through Mountain View, a new bridge and a tunnel. I think that those are nuclear options. I think that that's pretty clear, and I'm much more interested in collaborating with the city on kind of a unified transportation plan, on tangible solutions for 3 years, 5 years, 10 years from now, and not these sort of a UDOT official that they're on the record as saying these are something of a bypass of this magnitude would be this is a plan for 2050, and it's and also Monty Aldridge from UDOT was he stated that none of a plan like that would not UDOT wouldn't engage if there wasn't community consensus around it. So at this point, I see it as much more productive and pragmatic to move forward with the city and do what's necessary to make the city comfortable to come up with solutions now. But I generally still think that like the idea of a thorough public engagement process would be good form, but it's not a sort of a hill that I'm willing to die on.
My opinion of that right now is I don't know if it would tell us anything, because surveying the neighborhood, clearly people on the west side don't want the bypass. Everyone else is like, sure, is the bypass going to make Moab better? That sounds like a good idea. But we haven't finished our work on 191. We haven't done any work downtown to try to alleviate any solutions. So I just think that we need to wait to start that kind of like public engagement until some other solutions have been implemented. Otherwise, we're not getting a true test of the solutions.
Yeah, I guess I also wanted to respond to some of the points Gabe raised, and many other people have raised. So I'm maybe I shouldn't say I'm responding to Gabe. I'm responding to some other person. I mean, if in an ideal world where we had forever, why not study things, for a long time and be really thorough? But the fact is, there are decisions being made about highway projects right now, and Grand County and Moab City don't have complete control over that. I mean, UDOT has its own desires in its own constituency, and it has a lot of power in deciding these things. So that's part of it. The other is that the history of studying the bypass is not just these last couple of years. I mean, I think 20 years ago, there was a lot of talk about this. And so if you put all of that history together, if 20 years later, we still can't think of a good place to put the bypass, to me, that tells us that we need to move on with finding other solutions. And so I think studying this issue further just delays, some real solutions that we could do with redeveloping downtown. And I'd like to move that into the first place for the options we consider, because I think the bypass, has had its chance over the last 20 years to prove itself to be a viable option. And I don't think that's happened.
Any further discussion?
Just one more thing about Commissioner Walker's motion. I wonder if we should, is there a reason, Kevin, that you can think that we shouldn't just include something in it that's like the county commission does not support the inclusion of the bypass in the RTP or UDOT's statewide rural long range plan?
I was thinking to keep it simpler, and because that's going to be on the city agenda next week, and it might be easier if we follow up with them rather than going first, but I don't have strong feelings.
Sarah, to that point, I would almost say that I forget the name of the study that outlined a handful of different bypass options, but I would feel more comfortable taking a stance that we don't support any of those options. And then that would kind of leave the any mention in the regional plan much more nebulous. I definitely don't support too loud, busy roads in the valley, but if there was a way that I could trade one for another, like maybe I could imagine something like that. So, you know, if downtown was like Breckenridge, where they moved Highway 9 and made 2 blocks pedestrian only, and you can't even drive through it all, like that might be something that got me to scratch my head and say, huh, could some.
Yeah, so I guess
you got muted.
You answer to Sarah's question. I guess another reason I didn't want to put it on because I think we need to discuss it more, like as Evan just pointed out.
Yeah, it's probably
I think we need, at this point, keep the ball moving, eliminate the concerns of the city so that we don't lose this funding. And I think we should call for a vote. Any objections? Okay, I'll call for a vote. All in favor of the motion? All opposed? Okay, passes 6-1 with Evan in opposition. We are to adopting resolution supporting the completion of the Colorado River Park pathway. I think this is going to be a fast agenda item. Don't
jinx us.
This is a resolution to put in the packet to show community support. That's one thing that Ryan Levitt told us we needed in order to help the possibility of getting this funding. So Chris was kind enough to spend part of his weekend, and thank you, Chris. I was hoping this would have, I didn't think it was going to put this much work on you. I'm very sorry that happened. Anyway, that's what.
I didn't do it over the weekend.
Oh, good.
Wrapped it just yesterday.
Okay, now I'm feeling so much better, but you did do a lot of work and I appreciate it. So are there any questions?
So just for the public's sake, I'd like to just give a quick overview.
Okay.
So phase 4 of the Colorado River pathway is the gap between Grand Staff Canyon and the transit hub in that pathway. And as is illustrated in the resolution, there's about 30,000 bikers that come off of the whole Enchilada Trail system, and probably a large majority of them probably ride back into town or down to the transit hub. And so we probably got, several thousand people getting forced out onto the highway to compete with traffic. It's been, we did apply for a Federal Lands Access Program grant for this in 2016 and weren't successful that way. But now there's what's being called the Federal Community Project Funding Program. It's basically, bringing federal earmarks back to the table. And so if, there's a lot of hoops that need to, be jumped through in order for this program to even be eligible for us. The Republican caucus has to concede to it, and our representatives also have to participate. But it is a potential to earmark some funding for this, and so I think it's definitely worth pursuing. This resolution just establishes our position once again. The deadline for making some kind of proposal to our representatives could be first week in April, or maybe even sooner. And so, that's part of the reason here. And then I think that, we don't really we're not to the point where we could put together any other proposal, I don't think, within 2 weeks time frame. That, we can put this one together really fast because we've put together a grant proposal already just in 2016. And so, pull all that information, repurpose it, be a quick proposal to our representatives. But moving forward into the future, I think, this federal community project funding program, if it does continue, we'd want to, probably invest some significant energy into it, and also think about, the priorities that we have across the community for infrastructure, not just projects like this, but, any other type of infrastructure need. So with that, this resolution is just reestablishing and re-edifying our support for the project, that we could use for a proposal to our representatives in the near term.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you. I was trying too hard to speed up the meeting. Okay, discussion? Motion?
I'll move to approve the resolution supporting the funding and construction of the Colorado River Pathway.
Motion by Jacques. Do I have a second? Second
I'll
by
second
Sarah.
that, Mary.
Any further discussion? All in favor? All opposed? Passes unanimously. Had to get the noise out of the room, sorry. We are to consensus agenda, ratifying the chair's signature on a grant agreement with the City of Moab for the Foundation Center, ratifying the chair's signature on a letter of support for the Moab Town Ramp Rivers Trails and Conservation Assistant Grant application, approving Kins Lake Irrigation Water Transfer Agreement with the Grand County Cemetery District and the Old Spanish Trail Arena, ratifying the chair's signature on letter of support to the Utah Department of Transportation for Salt Lake Express application to provide bus service between Blanding and Salt Lake City. Do I have a
adopt the consent agenda as presented?
motion by Kevin? Do I have a second? Seconded by Jacques. Discussion? All in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? Passes unanimously. We are moving to discussion on the Grand County's organizational structure. Chris Baird.
Thanks, Mary. So just as a primer, last year, our planning and zoning director's position was actually called Community and Economic Development Director. And we pulled the economic development component out and fused it with Elaine Gisler's job description and retitled her position as Economic Development Director. But at this point in time, we haven't actually reorganized that department. I guess that department, the Planning and Zoning Department, is still technically called Community and Economic Development. And so, we mildly got the cart before the horse, but I think with us going through recruitment for the Planning and Zoning Director, that's a good time once again to potentially formalize some reorganization that makes sense for that department. One of the big things the goals that I would like to see for making that reorganization would be to establish a community development department with divisions, and those divisions would be planning and zoning, engineering, and building inspection. All three of those have to work very closely together, and I've really wanting to see more coordination amongst them. So this is just a discussion topic, but that's kind of the main gist of why I bring it up, is that our organizational structure doesn't really match our job descriptions anymore. And so we should fix that. And I also think that, you know, fusing those 3 departments right now under one umbrella department and retitling them as divisions, it's a move toward best practice. We do have a budget for organizational structure consultation, and I'm going to have a meeting this Friday with Jones and DeMille. They have sort of a sister agency that works on those kinds of things commonly, but it's tends to be easiest to do reorganization when you're in between, you know, director positions. And so I just wanted to bring that up, that I'll probably craft some, you know, at least relatively simple or proposal for reorganization for community development. There's also, you know, a lot of other broader reorganizational topics that I have in mind, but I think it's probably best to wait on those until we get through with our consultation and our study on our organizational structure. There's a lot of other topics to bring up as well. Just the, you know, the fact that we're missing any kind of mid-level management. And Mallory and I are basically, you know, serving as, you know, the executive secretary for the commission, and then upper level and mid-level management for all of the departments underneath of us. There really is no best practice style structure. And it, you know, it has effects on my ability to do some of the, or, you know, affect some of our long range strategic goals, you know, just because we're involved in so many details. And so I think that in the long run, it would help a lot to do a reorganization and free Mallory and I up to do, you know, some more work on policy, moving forward with, you know, getting new office space designed and built, all these kinds of things, but really difficult to do with the way that we've got everything structured. But, you know, this is one step in that process, and I'm fairly sure that this would be what we'd want to do, even if we went through the process with, you know, organizational consultant. And even if it's not exactly what we end up wanting in the long run, you know, we can tweak it. But I think that this will really help a lot in the day-to-day details to have more coordination between planning and zoning, engineering, and building inspection.
So could you speak to the option of bringing on a director or department head now, as well as a division head?
Well, you know, in the immediate sense, what I would probably propose is that one of the division heads would also serve as the department head. And, you know, just give maybe a couple grade increase or something like that to help out. In the long run, though, you know, it probably makes sense to establish a position specific to being the director of the department. That's not
besides cost. Is there cons or disadvantages to making that move now?
Cost, I would say, is the only issue. You know, it would be, you know, probably $150,000 more a year.
Yeah. I'm just wondering if, I mean, to kind of increase somebody's duties and then pay them more and then be like, but this is only temporary, and in a few years we'll get somebody else, and then we'll redo your job description then and probably take your pay back down then. I wonder if it's just going to create more headaches in the long run than to just kind of bite the bullet and get out ahead of it. I mean, I know that your office is putting a lot of time and energy into these different departments or divisions, and I wonder if to your point of you know, it's easier to reorganize when these positions are empty. I wonder if now's the time to just kind of buckle down.
I mean, we do have to go through a fairly significant budget amendment for a variety of reasons. And so I guess we could talk about it. And, you know, I can't really say one way or the other without crunching the numbers. because it really is a financial issue only. I
Yeah.
mean, if we had our, infinite resources, then yeah, I would definitely say to carve out a specific position for the department director. But I can't say that I would necessarily support that at this point without, crunching the numbers and see how that would affect our bottom line and our ability to, to sustain financial solvency into the future. But I have, talked with Bill Holtz a bit about it, and, he seems like he's on board with the idea, whether it's he or the planning and zoning director that we hire. And so it's not something that I haven't talked to staff with about already. So I don't think that it would be a big issue to proceed, just using one of the division heads also as the department director. They would just, have the added responsibility to think about how to create sort of department level policy that kind of smooths the process out and creates more collaboration between these divisions, or what would be divisions. They're departments right now.
Yeah.
And
Well,
so as time goes on, it could be a more substantive role. At this point, it's really just sort of Mallory and I trying to coordinate them, amongst all the other things that we have to do as well. And so we have limited ability to do that, but a lot of it has to do with getting the software coordination up and running and all the details associated with that. And there's a way to really sync all these departments in, with the software, which hasn't happened yet. And then a variety of other processes that have caused some problems, I think, in just the administration of land use applications, and then seeing those projects through, that could definitely be improved. And so just having somebody looking out for those kinds of things, I mean, that would be the main role, is just to help coordinate between all three so that they're much more efficient and effective.
And we currently have 2 vacancies in the P&Z.
That's right. So
yeah, I mean, I would almost lean towards the director, department head sort of position, and then the lower P&Z position being filled, and then filling in the middle later. But I know this is just discussion, so I'd be curious to see what some of those costs to the county might be. Because I think we've been getting a lot of feedback from constituents that this whole thing, like you're saying, needs to be tightened up and cleaned up and streamlined, and this seems like an essential county service that we should be providing, and maybe we just got to spend the money to get somebody in to tighten it all up instead of trying to put a hat on top later,
yeah, I mean, that's an option. Like I say, I just don't know what the financial feasibility of adding an upper level management position is right now.
Yeah.
And, part of that is just because I don't know what our revenues are looking like yet for 2020. Our revenues lag by 2 months. And so, like I showed you earlier in the meeting, we really are only aware of where we're at financially at December point in time. And so we have to wait 2 months, 2 to 3 months actually, before we really understand, what we're heading into. And I think we saw an unusual bump after we reopened after the COVID closures. And I think those are, they might be an anomaly. I wouldn't necessarily count on those kinds of things. There might be some normalization that happens that could bring us, perhaps below, what we would hope for. I don't know. But I still feel slightly insecure with regard to what our revenues are going to look like for 2021. But we do have, the $1 million grant for the airport, which is going to free up probably about $600,000 or so of general fund money. But again, it's not something that we're going to have forever. And so in the immediate sense, I think we'd be all right. But it's really more a question of the long term, because when you talk about hiring somebody, that's an annual expense that happens over and over and over again every single year. And using, sort of one-time funding availability to fund ongoing expenses is just a bad idea. It's not something we want to do.
So my comment is I support the general idea of trying to get better coordination between these three different departments or divisions, whatever you want to call them. I think that's something that has been a problem in the past. In terms of priorities for hiring, I feel the highest priority is getting someone with planning expertise who can, push through revisions to our land use code and our general plan and that kind of thing. I think those types of things have really long range consequences for us. And some of the problems we're dealing with now are basically planning failures from 10 years ago. And not necessarily anyone's fault because no one has a crystal ball, but I think it's worth putting effort into planning and not just trying to keep up with keep our treading water, dealing with the applications as they come in. And then about the budgeting things you were saying, while it's true that we don't want to rely on one-time windfalls to support us over the years. I mean, some of the windfalls we're getting are enough to fund an extra position for 3 or 4 years. So I do think that in the long term, our revenues are probably going to go up a bit. So I wouldn't be super duper cautious, but something we continue to discuss, I guess.
Yeah, well, I think I can work with Renee on coming up with a job description for a department director, and kind of just think about it a little bit more. But like I say, I think at this point it's just hard for me to say one way or the other if it makes sense financially. So it's and a lot of the time I look at these things as just incremental gains. I don't think that it's something that can be solved entirely in one swoop. We just keep making incremental gains in the direction that we need to be going, and we'll eventually get there if we're dedicated to it. But there's a lot of other organizational issues across the county also, not just this one. And so I kind of felt like it would be a good idea to take the bigger picture look at those needs before we started establishing new positions altogether.
And then one last question. As I understand it, if there is a new position, it would be doing work that's now being done by you and Mallory. But that doesn't sound like a full-time job.
No, not that. And that's another issue. I think that if we did create a director, that they would have to share in some of the load of what the planning and zoning department engages in, building department, engineering, those kinds of things. And so they would just take on some of that work as well, which may be necessary because we're kind of perennially behind on it all. So even when we were fully staffed, and so it's possible that we may actually need more staff power working on some of these things. And I can think about that more and what that position would look like. Part of our issue also is just that we're contract engineering right now entirely, and we only spend about maybe $35,000 a year on that. So we're kind of far from justifying bringing on an engineer, although it's certainly cut down on the time frame for our applicants. But it's just hiring a certified engineer, that's at least $150,000, and that's for somebody that's probably fresh out of school. And so there's other things to kind of think about too if we're going to put money into planning and zoning. potentially bringing in Jones DeMille to do some inspections and upping our budget for engineering to kind of speed some of that stuff up too is another issue. But, you know, it's just hard to make these financial decisions sort of in a vacuum without looking at the big picture. So I can, you know, try to do that and look at the bigger picture and see what our possibilities are. But, you know, at least I think that we should, you know, adjust the organizational structure and kind of create this sort of interim director position. And I think it will help a lot. And then, you know, if we can't afford it, maybe we should consider, you know, establishing a director position. So, you know, this conversation was just for brainstorming these kinds of things. And so I can look into any suggestions that you have, you know, in more depth and more detail and bring something back to you with a variety of options. Any other discussion on this?
Okay, thank you, Chris.
You're welcome.
Mallory, calendar?
Okay, so the big things are we have a public hearing scheduled for our April 6th meeting regarding the land use code amendment that Christina spoke to in the workshop. I wasn't sure, so forgive me if I missed it, but did you all want to have a public hearing for the Title 11 noise pollution ordinance? It is not required, but it is an option to give the public more input. I'm not sure, Christina.
I remember Christina saying that she was recommending that because it's an important, there she is.
Yeah, I do recommend it. The city, as far as I know, is planning to do it. We don't need to do it, but obviously there's a big controversial issue.
I think we should.
Okay, I will notice that for a public hearing as well. And then there is the special event calendar that I know the Travel Council, Elaine and Mary Lou have sent out, and they've been working to update that with more information. So that should be up to date. I know that currently the Evoke Life, Cruise Moab, and Mesa Back, which is a running event, have all gone through or are in the process of going through the special event committee. But I think that that's really all that I have, other than another plug to please take your Open and Public Meeting Act training. I think it takes about 10, 15 minutes at most, but the auditors do ask for that every year. So I can send out a reminder. I think I was supposed to do that after the last meeting, but if there aren't any questions, that's all that I have tonight.
Yeah, a reminder would be very helpful. Thank you.
I'll do it right now.
Thank you, Mallory.
Can you include a link to the class in the reminder, please?
Yes, I'll do that right now.
I just did mine 2 nights ago and it's super quick. It's 10 minutes max.
Yeah.
And if you can forward me the certificates, that's actually what we physically give the auditors.
Okay, we are to the public hearing to solicit input on proposed ordinance amending ordinance number 588 and land use code section 6.5.3 exempt signs, 6.5.4 prohibited signs, 6.5.5 permitted signs, illumination, and 10.2 definitions. Christina Sloan.
Yes, I'll keep this short. The proposed amendment is very straightforward. Our dark skies ordinance does not expressly prohibit changing message signs or digital signs like LED signs. There were 2 billboard bills run in the general session. Neither one passed, thankfully. But they would have required, we had this express language, which we did not have in our dark skies ordinance. So I recommend amending it accordingly. The one thing I want to point out is that this does apply to all signs, not just billboards. And the Planning Commission did unanimously motion to recommend it, and we had no public comments that I recall anyway at the Planning Commission public hearing.
Okay. Do we have any public wanting to speak on this, Mallory?
Did you formally open it, or is that sufficient?
Oh, I didn't. I didn't formally open it. I'm sorry. I am now opening this public hearing, possible action item, public hearing to solicit input on proposed ordinances. Okay, it is opened.
Okay.
Is there anyone?
We have 2 folks on the call. I'm not sure if they're on for this. They were on earlier, so they may not be, but for the sake of opportunity, a phone number with the last 4 digits 2859, or Tyler, if either of you are on to comment on this public hearing, please unmute by pressing *6. Okay, Mary, I don't believe that we have any comments at this time.
Okay, this public hearing will remain open until the 24th of this month at 5 o'clock.
I just want to say thanks very much, Christina, for staying on top of this. So.
Yes, you're amazing. There is no closed session. We have reached the end of our agenda. If I do not have any objections, we will adjourn this meeting. No objections? Meeting adjourned. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.